Chapter 877. Hurry up, let's get out of here. Let's go. After seeing the mutant dogs leave, the paranormals thought that there might be something more terrible here, so they couldn't stay any longer. Lin Xiao stood in the house on the roof and watched the mutant dogs run away in fear after sensing her breath. She also watched the paranormals run out in fear, quickly heading in the direction of the base. She had restrained her breath, so the mutant dogs must have smelled her. Her breath also contained an element of danger, so they didn't dare to come close. Lin Xiao didn't jump down from the roof until those people were a distance away. After thinking about it, she entered the space again and took Wang, Dahe, and the mushroom spirit out for a walk. When she came out with the 3 mutant dogs, they were no longer in the original building. She took out an off-road vehicle and got into the driver's seat. Although she couldn't use her superpower, and she couldn't locate the entrance and exit of the space, but she had no problem taking out and putting things in and out of the space. She didn't have any superpower now, so her attack power was reduced by at least 60%. With the physical attack power of her current body, although it wasn't very dangerous, it wasn't suitable for her to stay with strangers outside. So when she smelled someone from afar, she would take a detour and leave. Fortunately, every time she came out of the space, she was not far away from the place she came out last time, at most within 20 kilometers. This time, after coming out with the 3 mutant dogs, she had run from the Gongju district to the Westlake district. Looking at the dense woods around her, she didn't drive far before she put the off-road vehicle away. She had no choice because the road was impassable. The original road was covered with all kinds of grass and vines, and there were also branches sticking out from the side. Otherwise, there were big holes or cracks blasted by the mutant beasts fighting with each other, so it was impossible to drive. Lin Xiao could only walk with her legs. Woof, woof, woof. Maybe because he hadn't come out to play for a long time, Wang ran around excitedly as soon as he came out. He ran from the left to the right, and then from the back to the front. He was having a lot of fun. Even Dahe, who was lazy, raised his head excitedly and ran around in the grass in the woods. As for the ADHD mushroom spirit, she was even more excited. Just like Wang, they couldn't stop at all. Woof, 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 woof. Not long after, Wang ran to Lin Xiao with a black mouse that was half his size. Looking at the big rat, Lin Xiao was speechless. Was this guy trying to tell her that they hadn't eaten meat for a long time? Lin Xiao licked his lips as he smelled the scent of food coming from the rat. A sense of hunger arose. Indeed, she had not eaten for a long time. All right, this one is enough for me. If you want to eat it, go get it yourself. Lin Xiao asked Wang to put down the struggling level 3 mutant rat so that they could catch their own prey. Actually, when Wang brought the mouse in front of Lin Xiao, the other 2 had already rushed to the other side to catch the mouse. That's right, when Lin Xiao came out of the space this time, he directly ran to the zoo. However, it didn't land in the group of rats. Instead, it landed not far away from the group of rats. Lin Xiao looked at the big rat that Wang had thrown onto the ground. The rat wanted to run away as soon as it landed on the ground. Lin Xiao stretched out a finger and flicked it with its sharp nails. Puff! The level 3 mutant rat's head immediately fell off. The headless body moved its limbs for a while before it stopped moving. Lin Xiao walked over and looked at the big rat. The level 3 rat was already as big as a medium-sized dog. The black fur on its body was shiny, smooth, and clean. There was a faint energy in its fur. It was also because of the energy that the rat didn't grow any parasites on its body. After digging out the energy core of the rat and holding it in her hand for less than 2 seconds, the energy core turned into powder and scattered from her hand. She dragged the headless corpse of the rat and found a clean spot to start skinning it. While skinning, she used her nails to cut off the meat piece by piece and threw it in her mouth to eat. It was tender and delicious. The raw meat was also a bit soft and chewy. As a zombie, Lin Xiao either didn't eat at all or ate a lot when she did. Moreover, she didn't know if it was because of Little Man, but she couldn't stop eating. Although the level 3 mutant beast didn't have a lot of energy in its body, the energy made the meat very delicious. While Lin Xiao was quietly eating the raw rat meat, the other three had begun to wreak havoc at the edge of the rat herd. After the second virus outbreak, the huge rat herd that covered thousands of acres was bitten to death by the crazy mutant rats. After so many days, the rat herd was not as dense as before, and the area it covered was no longer just thousands of acres. Now from the zoo, the huge rat herd occupied at least 5 or 6 square kilometers. However, Lin Xiao still didn't know about this because she had been unconscious for almost a month. She didn't know how fast the rat herd was spreading. But according to her current position, she had already reached the edge of the rat herd, which was a few kilometers away from the zoo. Dahe silently shuttled through the dark forest, its pair of cold eyes tightly staring at the level 4 mutated rat in a group of small rats in the distance. The level 4 mutant rat was bigger than a large dog, and it seemed to weigh more than 100 kilograms. The fur on its body was smooth, black and shiny. It didn't notice that it had been targeted by its natural enemy, the snake. At this time, it was pouncing on a mutant deer and gnawing on its meat. The surrounding low-level rats were a few meters away from it, not daring to get too close. Just then, the level 4 mutant rat suddenly raised its head and looked around vigilantly. After finding nothing unusual, it lowered its head and grabbed a bloody bone with its 2 front claws, putting it into its mouth and gnawing on it. Kacha! Kacha! Just as it lowered its head and gnawed with relish, a black shadow suddenly fell from the sky, and a dangerous aura suddenly locked it. The level 4 mutant rat's whole body stiffened. It was scared by this aura and couldn't move. In its heart, it desperately shouted to run, but its limbs were stiff and couldn't move. When it looked up, it saw a huge snake head open its mouth, showing 2 poisonous fangs and biting it fiercely. So the level 4 mutant rat flew into the sky. Well, its soul flew into the sky. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The sudden appearance of the giant snake immediately scared the surrounding rats, and they instantly jumped up and ran around for their lives. Dahe bit the still struggling rat and impolitely injected the venom in its fangs into it. After a while, the giant rat softly drooped down and stopped moving. Dahe happily dragged the rat away, climbed up a tree, and found a comfortable position to slowly enjoy it. Chapter 878. On the other side, the mushroom spirit also stretched out its mutated tentacles and happily sucked the blood of a level 3 mutated rat. After Lin Xiao finished eating the whole mutated rat, she left behind a pile of internal organs and fur. She turned around and jumped up a tall tree. After she emerged from the canopy, she looked in the direction of the swarm of rats. Squinting her eyes slightly, she could see that there were some rats with relatively high energy levels among the group of rats. It seemed like they were of a higher level. The other side of the originally dense forest had been gnawed clean and was full of sawdust. The ground was full of countless black-haired rats. Lin Xiao saw that half of the forest was filled with tall green trees, while the other half was a desolate flatland. Countless black rats were surging on the flatland. Coming down from the tree, Lin Xiao began to walk around the edge of the swarm of rats. Since she was already here, she decided to check out the situation of these rats. After Ah Wong, Dahe, and the mushroom spirit had a full meal, they followed Lin Xiao and walked around the swarm of rats. Of course, these rats were so large that they were not only destructive, they had also attracted many of their natural enemies. Birds, snakes, cats, and dogs were all good at catching rats. Therefore, Lin Xiao saw some hunting scenes from time to time. There were many mutated cats and mutated dogs. There were also many mutated eagles and other raptors flying in the sky. From time to time, they would land with a big rat in their claws and fly up again. Not far ahead of Lin Xiao, a group of people was being chased by a swarm of rats. Bang, bang, bang. More than a dozen SUVs were protecting the trucks in the middle. They were holding all kinds of guns and shooting at the large group of black-haired rats that were chasing after them. There were paranormals and ordinary people among these people. The people in the modified trucks were all ordinary people. There were paranormals and ordinary people in the dozens of SUVs. However, they were all ordinary people with relatively high combat power. They had to kill zombies in front and mice at the back. If they were not careful, they would be scratched or bitten by zombies. Lin Xiao smelled them from afar. From the direction they were coming from, she could roughly guess that they were from Hidden Cloud City or Ground Dragon Base. I told you not to go this way. You didn't believe me. Look, not only are these rats chasing after us, they will also attract other mutated beasts. In one of the off-road vehicles, a man gloomily stared at the others and said. The others didn't have time to care about him. They were all attacking the rats from both sides of the window or the roof of the car. The rats at the back were all as big as cats, and there were even bigger rats. Moreover, their movements were very agile and fast. His jumping ability was also very strong, and he could jump a few meters with a single leap. Suddenly, a giant rat the size of a domesticated pig, weighing at least 300 catties, rushed out from the side of the convoy. With a single leap, he accurately pounced onto the outermost car. Bang! Squeak! The greater rat's black fur shone as it swung its thick tail and landed on the roof of the car. Half of the car was crushed by the impact. A person who was standing on the roof of the car and trying to attack was bitten on the head by the giant rat and dragged out of the car. Bang, bang. The car was crushed until half of it collapsed. The steering wheel in the driver's hand slipped and slammed into a cement pillar on the side. The whole car flipped over. Squeak! The giant rat nimbly jumped off the car when the car flipped over. Cough, cough, cough. The people in the car were not dead yet, but they had lost the ability to move. At this moment, the giant rat raised its claws and waved. Poof! The car door was slashed open. Then, the giant rat opened its mouth and bit, pulling the steel door outward. Immediately, a hole was opened. However, for the few people in the car who were not dead yet, they died even faster. The giant rat stuck its sharp mouth and nose in and immediately bit one of the people and dragged him out. The person was dragged out with blood all over his body. His internal organs and bones were severely damaged. He could only let out a shrill scream. At this time, the other rats immediately surrounded them and went in through the window or the hole. They directly opened their mouth and bit. When this car flipped, the people in the other cars did not turn around to help. Now, they basically only cared about themselves. As long as they were alive, it was fine. In addition to the ordinary people in the car, there were also some armed men standing on the roof of the car, shooting at the rats and zombies that approached the car. Motherfucker, go to hell. At this time, a man in an off-road vehicle shouted and threw a grenade in his hand towards the giant rat that was as big as a pig. Boom! Squeak! The giant rat could not dodge in time and was blown to the side. However, as soon as it fell, it immediately rolled from the ground and fiercely rushed towards the car that threw the grenade. The grenade is useless against it. It's coming. As soon as the man saw the giant rat that was still able to get up after being blown away, he saw that it was heading towards them. After seeing it coming towards them, he panicked and screamed. At this time, the zombies in front of them suddenly disappeared. The group of rats behind them suddenly stopped, stood up, and sniffed something with their noses. Bang, bang, bang. These people were still shooting because the rats suddenly stopped. Many of them were shot dead by them. Squeak! At this time, the biggest rat suddenly screamed, turned around, and ran away. After the other rats heard it, they immediately turned around and ran back. They retreated. What happened? They didn't chase. The expressions of the people in the car became blank. After a while, they all became surprised. They all let out a big sigh of relief. That's great. They didn't chase. Motherfucker, I thought I was going to die. Fuck. These mutated rats grew so big, it's too scary. Less than 300 meters away from their car, Lin Xiao stood there expressionlessly on a tree. Although she had retracted her aura, there was no way to conceal her scent. So when she got closer, these rats all smelled her scent and were scared away. And the surrounding zombies, even if they did not smell her scent, they could still feel the pressure of her kind. Of course, these were all things that humans could not feel. Lin Xiao did not intend to meet these people, so she turned around and left in the other direction. But after she left, She did not notice that in this car, there was a person who was blankly looking in her direction. It seemed that he felt something, but he was not very sure. However, he looked at the group of rats that suddenly retreated, and then looked at the place where Lin Xiao was just hiding. He could not help but say, "I think there may be something more dangerous nearby." "What did you find?" As soon as he spoke, the others immediately looked at him nervously. "I don't feel anything now." The man shook his head, but his expression did not relax. Chapter 879. Sun Lunan looked in that direction thoughtfully and hesitantly guessed in his heart, "What's wrong?" The people next to him saw him like this and asked him. Looking outside, not only were the rats gone, but the zombies were also gone. For a moment, it suddenly quieted down, which made everyone feel somewhat at a loss and uncomfortable. Sun Lunan suddenly pointed in the direction where Lin Xiao had gone and said, "Let's go that way." The people next to him looked at him in confusion. "Why?" Sun Lunan's eyes flashed. "I just felt something over there." Because of this thing, the mutated rats and zombies that were chasing us suddenly retreated. But that thing gave me a feeling that there was no danger. So I think we will be safer if we follow its direction. Hearing this, the eyes of the others immediately lit up. "Really? Are you sure? What is that thing? Can you feel it?" Sun Lunan stuck his head out of the car and sniffed, then pulled back and shook his head. "I don't know what it is. Let's not get too close. Just go in this direction." His ability was of the zoology family, and he was a canine. A dog's nose and intuition were very strong, and they were very sensitive to danger. So they treated him as a guide. At least when he pointed in a special direction, their intuition would be safer. Sun Lunan's car was in the first place, so wherever they went, the cars behind followed. Lin Xiao walked with the three of them, and suddenly felt that the cars kept a fixed distance from her. She was a little surprised. Could these people feel her presence? It seemed to feel that it was being followed, and Dahe was obviously a little unhappy. But with a bulging stomach, it was too lazy to move. It just stuck out its tongue from time to time, and its eyes looked very impatient. "Don't move. Hide and see what they're doing." Lin Xiao's eyes flashed, and she said to the three of them. Dahe liked to hide, so it disappeared as soon as Lin Xiao finished speaking. The mushroom spirit directly dug its legs into the ground, and after a few burrows, it stayed in the same place. It was like a big mushroom that had originally grown here. The place where she was at was originally a forest park, and now the mutated trees had grown taller than before, but many of them had withered. The road in the park was not easy to walk on. The motorcade turned along the edge of the park. Even if they slowly pulled away from Lin Xiao, they still maintained the same direction. After Lin Xiao stopped, Sun Lunan suddenly said, "Wait a minute. That thing seems to have stopped. We can't keep following it like this. Besides, we still have to go to the new base. This thing can't go. Should we go and see what it is? If possible, how about luring it to the upper city base with us? With its existence, we don't need to be afraid of those zombies and rats," someone said after thinking for a while. Sun Lunan glanced at him, somewhat tempted. But first, he had to figure out what it was. What if it was something dangerous? But if it wasn't something dangerous, it wouldn't scare away the zombies and mutant rats. Moreover, they had been following the other party for so long, but the other party did not seem to have noticed anything unusual. "I'll bring 2 people with me to check out what it is. Maybe it's a very powerful mutated beast," Sun Lunan said after thinking for a while. Since the other party could move it, it was most likely a mutated beast. However, it could also be a mutated plant. It wasn't like there weren't any plants that could run. "Just a few of you? That's too dangerous. We're in the forest." The others heard and said disapprovingly, "It's okay. I don't feel any danger. If there's any danger, we'll immediately give up and come back." Sun Lunan said firmly. Their current position was tens of kilometers away from the upper city. If they could get their hands on this thing, they would be in danger on the road ahead. Tens of kilometers was not long, but it wasn't short either. However, danger was always present. Along the way, 2/3 of their team had already died. The remaining people were the ones who had sacrificed their lives in exchange for their survival. He had to think of a way to bring these people to the safe base in the upper city. So now he wanted to take the risk to see what that thing was. Maybe this thing was only a threat to the mutated beasts and zombies, but not to humans. Although it was dangerous, it could also be an opportunity for them. After all, these two things sometimes existed at the same time. Moreover, Sun Lunnen's intuition was very accurate. Although it wasn't very strong, it was very good at escaping. Then bring Chi-Chi along. She should be of some use. Someone said. Sun Lunnen thought about it. Chi-Chi was an ice ability user. Although she hadn't broken through to level 5, she was almost there. She still had some attack power. They stopped the car and prepared their weapons. Chi-Chi followed Lunnen in to take a look. Peng Xian shouted at the other car. However, no one came down from the car he was looking at. Peng Xian could only look at Sun Lunnen helplessly. Sun Lunnen smiled and shouted at the car, Chi-Chi, come here. Then a young girl came down from the car. She was wearing a light-colored trench coat with a white t-shirt underneath. She was wearing light blue jeans with a white stripe and a pair of black boots that reached her calves. The girl's delicate face was expressionless. Her eyes were cold, and her long black hair flowed smoothly down to her hips. Chi-Chi was only 20 years old this year. She was very young. In the apocalypse, a girl like her would be in a dangerous situation if she was surrounded by a group of men. Fortunately, she was one of the top 5 in the team in terms of strength. Anyone who dared to provoke her would have to be prepared to be frozen into a popsicle. She wasn't tall, but her body was thin and her legs were long and slender. She walked in front of Sun Lunnen with her slender legs, and her cold eyes showed some warmth. Brother Lunnen. She wouldn't give face to anyone here, but she would only listen to Sun Lunnen. Sun Lunnen nodded and glanced at her before saying to the others, everyone knows the dangers of entering the forest, so don't be careless. Just as they were about to enter the forest to look for something, Lin Xiao had already concealed her aura and slowly approached them. When she stopped, she saw that the other party had indeed stopped as well. It seemed that the other party was really watching her. Lin Xiao wanted to see what these people were planning to do by following her. She was also not heading back to the base. Weren't they heading back to the base? After a while, she sensed a few human auras approaching her. These people were quite brave to enter the forest that was filled with mutated plants, and they were obviously coming for her. Weren't they afraid of angering her? Chapter 880. When she was a few hundred meters away from the other party, Lin Xiao stopped and stood on a tree, waiting quietly. How did these people discover her? And how could they keep following her? Soon, she found out that the group of people could accurately avoid the positions of the highly aggressive mutated plants. They turned left and right, making their way towards her position. Although their speed was a little slow, they did not encounter any actual danger. It seemed that among these people, someone had awakened a special skill. Lin Xiao stood on a branch that was tens of meters high, her army green camouflage uniform hidden in the leaves. As long as she did not move, no one would be able to discover her. But soon, she found out that she was wrong. She saw that the group of 5 slowly walked to a position not far from where she was on the tree. One of the men in the group twitched his nose and suddenly raised his head to look at the branch she was on. So when the two of them looked at each other, Lin Xiao stared expressionlessly at the other party's eyes, her mind sweeping away all the thoughts she had just had. Who said that no one could discover her? Where did this person come from? Her breath had been suppressed to the extreme, but her position was still accurately discovered by the other party. At this time, Sun Lunnen was also very surprised because he had thought that it could be a mutated animal or a mutated plant or even a high-level zombie. But unexpectedly, he saw a person, a woman. Since she had been discovered, there was no point in hiding anymore. Lin Xiao directly flipped down for the top of the branch, and then nimbly landed on a branch that was only a few meters higher than Sun Lunnen and the others. Who are you? After Lin Xiao came down, he looked down at them with an expressionless face and asked calmly. She did not ask why these people were following her, because then she might not be able to find out their intentions. Mo Chi-Chi took a step forward and guarded in front of Sun Lunnen. She slightly raised her head and stared closely at Lin Xiao. And when Lin Xiao saw the 2 dog ears on Sun Lunnen's head suddenly standing up, she could more or less guess what was going on. All right, There was a humanoid dog with a very good nose here. Did they find her by following her scent? Sun Lunan looked at Lin Xiao and sniffed around to make sure that there was no one else around. Only then did he confirm that this woman had appeared here alone. Since he dared to barge into the forest alone, it was obvious that he was not a simple person. Sun Lunan did not say a word and just stared at Lin Xiao, sizing him up. "Who are you?" Another man behind him stared at Lin Xiao and couldn't help but ask. After seeing Lin Xiao's face, apart from Sun Lunan and Mo Chi-Chi, the eyes of the other three flashed with amazement and fascination. "What a beauty!" Lin Xiao glanced at the man without saying a word. The other party's blatant gaze didn't cause her expression to change in the slightest. Sun Lunan looked at Lin Xiao. He could not sense the level of the other party's aura. He could only smell it. The woman's scent was very strange. There was a light and strange fragrance. It was not like the smell of the plants in this forest, nor was it like the sweet fragrance of flowers. He could not see the woman's strength and ability level. However, his intuition told him that it would be very dangerous if he made this woman his enemy. "I'm sorry, we were just passing by. If we disturbed you, I apologize. Let's leave now." Following the intuition in his heart, Sun Lunan immediately responded. When the other three heard him, they immediately looked at Sun Lunan with a strange expression. They opened their mouths, but were stopped by Sun Lunan's glare. Lin Xiao looked at them expressionlessly. It seemed that the other party did not intend to tell them why they were following her. Seeing that she was not speaking, Sun Lunan immediately gestured for the others to retreat. He then took a few steps back, and when he saw that Lin Xiao still did not move, he immediately turned and ran out. The other three stared at Lin Xiao's face regretfully for a while before turning and leaving. After leaving a distance, he then asked Sun Lunan, "Why are you retreating? Is that woman dangerous?" Sun Lunan nodded and said, "I couldn't sense the level of the other party's superpower, and although the other party wasn't hostile. Although she is not hostile, she doesn't seem to want us to go near her." The others were not stupid. When they heard Sun Lunan say that he could not sense the level of her ability, it could only mean that she had either not awakened her ability or that her ability level was too high and she was hiding it. Since she dared to appear alone in this dangerous forest, she must not be a simple person. She's so beautiful. She's also very clean. Another person licked his lips. A look of infatuation and greed flashed in his eyes. Sun Lunan looked at him and said coldly, "I think you better not think of provoking her. My intuition tells me that she's not a good person." "Then we'll go back like this. What about the thing you were looking for? Are we not looking for it anymore?" Another person looked at Sun Lunan hesitantly and asked, "We've found it, but we can't take it away," Sun Lunan said calmly as he looked around for mutated plants and poisonous insects. When he saw Lin Xiao, he already knew that she was the thing he was looking for. But they might not have the ability to take her away, and she would not go with them. "Can't take it away? Then what should we do? There are still tens of kilometers before we reach the upper city. If we go on like this, I'm afraid there won't be many people who can make it to the safe base," another person said unwillingly. "There's no other way." The other party's intention was very clear. Just now, she didn't want to go with us. "So she definitely won't go with us," Sun Lunan said. That was why he made a prompt decision to leave with them immediately. Sun Lunan and the people around him did not know that although their voices were very far away from Lin Xiao, she could still hear their conversation clearly. Lin Xiao thought about the shock and surprise in the eyes of the dog-eared man just now. It seemed that he did not expect to meet her, or rather, he did not expect to meet a human. From their current conversation, she deduced that the other party might have found something beneficial on her, which was why he kept following her. He might even want to get her so that they could reach the base safely. It seemed that the other party had gotten the answer they wanted just now, but this answer made them feel afraid, which was why they left quickly. If not for that, based on the emotions in the eyes of the few men just now, they would probably do something bad to her. Seeing that the other party was leaving quickly, a giant black snake slowly slid down from the top of the tree. The giant snake bent its body and hung on the branch next to Lin Xiao. Its pair of cold and emotionless eyes silently looked in the direction where Sun Lunin and the others had left. Chapter 881. After Sun Lunin and the others left, Lin Xiao took Dahei, Ah Wang, and the other two to the edge of the rat colony. After waiting for a while, she suddenly felt a familiar zombie's aura approaching. Lin Xiao stopped on a tree and waited on a huge branch. Not long after, she saw a level 4 wind zombie land not far away from her. Roar Dash Leader. This level 4 wind zombie was one of the zombies that Lin Xiao had sent to Xiedong. She looked at it and nodded. Have you been watching over here? Roar Dash, yes. The wind zombie nodded, but he looked like he had been wronged. He was afraid of rats. He was the one who had found the rat colony, but he was sent by his leader to watch over here. Looking at these black-furred mice, the wind zombie's whole body felt uncomfortable and uncomfortable. Lin Xiao seemed to know what the wind zombie was thinking. She looked at him strangely. You are a zombie. Why are you afraid of rats? Roar Dash, this rat could eat zombies. The wind zombie responded weakly. Lin Xiao looked at him speechlessly. Was the weakness of this zombie that he was afraid of rats? He had been sent by Xiedong to watch over here for a month. Why was he afraid? Let's talk about the situation of this rat colony. It's good that you're here. Since you are here, I don't have to run anymore. Lin Xiao sat on the branch and touched her stomach. She asked about the size of the swarm and how long it would take to walk around the swarm. She didn't ask about the number, since there were so many of them that she couldn't count. Are there any powerful guys? Lin Xiao continued to ask after she had a general understanding of the rat colony. The wind zombie shook his head. Maybe there are, but you don't know. Lin Xiao looked at him silently and didn't say anything. After all, the wind zombie was only level 4, so he could only sense level 5 or 6 mutated beasts. He couldn't sense anything stronger. Lin Xiao took out a level 5 energy core from the space and sat on the tree to absorb the energy. Although she couldn't use her ability, she could still absorb energy. However, she could feel that the energy she absorbed would be directly absorbed by Little Man. Because her head was already empty, Little Man couldn't absorb her energy. Fortunately, she didn't feel anything strange in her stomach. It was just that he was worried at first, afraid that if Little Man didn't have any energy to absorb, it might affect her development. So he took out the energy core to absorb. In the end, she found that the energy she absorbed was all snatched away by Little Man. Lin Xiao did not care about this. Instead, he felt more at ease. After staying here for a few days to check on the situation of these rats, he found that these rats had stopped expanding. It didn't really stop, but it didn't bite anything it saw. It was a complete destruction. During this period, Dahei, Ah Wang, and the mushroom spirit had a great time. They could not stop eating meat. Fortunately, Dahei and Ah Wang knew to bring the energy core back for Lin Xiao. As for the mushroom, it was the prey that they had caught, so they took it all for themselves. They had no intention of sharing it with Lin Xiao. The level 6 Dahei was invincible in this group of snakes. It chased the mutant rats from level 3 to level 6 all day long. It didn't care about the low-level ones, so it disturbed the whole group of rats. The rats, who usually bit anything they saw, only knew to run away in fear under the breath of their natural enemy. It was impossible for them to pounce on Dahei and bite it, not to mention that Dahei was a level 6 mutant beast. Its breath could directly scare the mutant rats that had not yet leveled up to death. Lin Xiao took the energy core of the mutant rats that Ah Wang and Dahei had sent over the past 2 days and directly absorbed it into his body. Then Little Man absorbed it. It was a pity that humans couldn't eat the meat of the mutant rats for the time being. Otherwise, Lin Xiao would have wanted to catch a bunch of them to add to the meals of the people in the base. However, if the meat of the mutant rats was edible, Lin Xiao wouldn't have needed to catch them. Everyone would naturally pounce on them and catch them themselves. At that time, the unlucky situation would be reversed. When they came out of the forest park, Lin Xiao rode on Ah Wang's back because he couldn't drive. The zombie dog's black hair was still very short, but it was fluffy and soft. It wasn't small in size and was originally as tall as Lin Xiao's waist. Now that it had leveled up, It was almost at the position of Lin Xiao's chest. After the bald tail was removed, the length of its body was more than 9 meters, almost 2 meters. Therefore, carrying Lin Xiao, who only weighed more than 90 kilograms, was naturally very easy. When they encountered zombies, they would stay far away from them. When they encountered mutant beasts, other than those that were level 6 and above, they would also stay far away from them. When Lin Xiao returned to the periphery of the base without any obstructions, she met the group of people again. When she sensed that there were people, she had already released the 3 pets into the surrounding forest. Lin Xiao didn't dare to bring them into the space, because that meant that she would have to go in as well. She couldn't bring the other people in the space out for the time being. Unless she wasn't in a hurry to stay where she was, she wouldn't be afraid of running dozens of kilometers away in an instant. Standing on the roof, she could see the high walls of the base from afar. However, the zombies outside the base were all gone. Instead, there was a dense group of zombies surrounding the Wushan cultivation base. It's her. When Sun Lunan and the others saw Lin Xiao on the roof, they were surprised. This woman should also be a member of this new base. Anyway, the place where we met her before was the closest to this base. Another man said after seeing Lin Xiao. Should be. Sun Lunan looked at Lin Xiao, then retracted his gaze. At this time, everyone in the car was wounded, and their clothes were stained with blood and sand. Their bodies were tired and in pain, and they just wanted to quickly enter the base, find a place to rest, and have a meal. More importantly, there were still injured people in the team who needed treatment. In fact, Sun Lunan and the others were not in a relaxed mood, even though they had entered the safety zone around the base. The periphery of every base would be cleared of zombies. Other than the 200-meter empty isolation zone, the base's army would come out to clear the zombies outside the isolation zone every day, slowly expanding the safety zone around the base. Of course, because of Lin Xiao's uniqueness, the base's safety zone didn't need to be cleared by the army. Sun Lunan and the others had entered the zombie-free zone not long ago, but they didn't think that the new base's isolation zone could be expanded that far. Therefore, they didn't let their guard down. Lin Xiao stood on the roof and looked at their convoy. She noticed that a few heavy trucks were still in good condition, but the number of off-road vehicles around them seemed to have decreased. She didn't take it to heart, turned around, and jumped down from the building. Chapter 882. Lin Xiao landed on the ground and took out a car. He sat in the driver's seat and drove towards the south gate of the base. In fact, he was just following behind Sun Lunan and the rest. After a few minutes of driving, they arrived at the isolated area outside the base. The car slowly drove past the isolated area and stopped at the south gate. There was a check before entering the base, but there was no such equipment at the gate of the base. "Stay here and don't move." The soldiers at the south gate of the base said loudly to Sun Lunan and the rest. Then Sun Lunan and the rest looked at a team of soldiers in camouflage coming out of the gate with a blank face. They were all wearing hats and sunglasses so that they couldn't see their faces clearly. The group of people split up and walked around each of their vehicles. Then they returned to the gate and nodded at the soldiers at the gate. Then they made a gesture to let them pass and left. "Okay, you can come in. Follow me." The captain of the soldiers at the gate nodded and turned to greet Sun Lunan and the rest. Sun Lunan and the others looked at each other in a daze for a moment. How could they pass just like that? Didn't they need a check? "Don't you need a check?" Sun Lunan couldn't help getting out of the car and walked to the captain of the soldiers and asked. At the same time, he thought of another problem. If the base didn't have a check, how would they know if anyone had brought in the virus? Wasn't it very unsafe? Yes, those people wearing sunglasses were checking for you. The captain smiled, showing his 8 teeth. Every time the new survivors came, they would ask this question. Sun Lunan's expression became more blank. Those people didn't do anything, they just walked around their cars, and they knew. Seeming to have guessed Sun Lunan's thoughts, the captain smiled and said, "Yes, if any of you were infected, they would know. Hurry up, many of your people are seriously injured. Don't worry, our base is very safe." As he spoke, the captain urged with good intentions. But the more he urged, the more Sun Lunan didn't dare to believe him. But the more he urged, the more Sun Lunan didn't dare to believe him. So the people in the heavy truck didn't get out of the car and just sat in the car and entered the base gate. Therefore, before the people on the heavy trucks got off, they inexplicably entered the base again. Only then did Lin Xiao appear at the very back. Lin Xiao did not get out of the car. Instead, he drove the car into the main gate with an expressionless face. Just now, when the zombie soldiers wearing glasses and hats came over to check, of course, they discovered her existence. Of course, they recognized Lin Xiao's aura. Without Lin Xiao's orders, they just needed to do their own tasks. After Lin Xiao drove the car in, he felt the aura coming from the entire base, many of which were unfamiliar. It seemed that several groups of people had entered the base while she was away. After Lin Xiao entered the base, the other people in the base all stopped what they were doing and looked at the south gate of the base blankly. Yuan Tianqing looked at Chen Yuding hesitantly and asked, "Do you sense the leader's aura?" Chen Yuding nodded and looked at him strangely. "I felt it. But why did she come back from outside? Didn't she stay in the base the entire time? When did he go out?" "You don't know? I thought you would at least know." Yuan Tianqing was the deputy leader. Even if their leader secretly left the base to deal with something, he would at least tell Yuan Tianqing. Now, looking at Yuan Tianqing's confused expression, it seemed that he didn't know. Elmar, Qiu Lily, Lin Kuei, and the others directly appeared in Lin Xiao's office. When Lin Xiao entered the office, she found that her office was already full of people. "You guys are really fast. Hey, Lin Kuei, you're back. Did you find your sister?" Lin Xiao calmly greeted everyone after coming in. Lin Kuei didn't say anything and just nodded. Before bringing Lin Jing here, Lin Kuei actually didn't feel much about this base. But after bringing Lin Jing back, he felt that his responsibility was a little heavy. At least he had a little sense of belonging. His sister was now living in this base. He couldn't protect her openly in the past, but now he could. He could protect Lin Jing openly and didn't need to hide anymore. He also didn't need to worry about being taken away for experiments. In order to give Lin Jing a place to stay and make it convenient for him to take care of her. Of course, Lin Kuei was willing to protect this newly built base. Lin Xiao nodded to him. "It's good that you found her. Congratulations." Lin Kuei smiled at Lin Xiao this time. The smile made his face look less gloomy. "Why did you come back from outside? Where did you go out? Why didn't we feel anything?" Elmar looked at Lin Xiao strangely. She couldn't see anything wrong with Lin Xiao's body, nor could she feel that Lin Xiao couldn't use her ability. Whether it was in her eyes, or in the eyes of Qiu Lily, Lin Kuei, and the other zombies, her aura was still at the peak of level 7. Lin Xiao walked to his desk that was piled up like a mountain and sat down. He picked up a document and opened it. "Oh, something happened, so I went out. Tell me, did anything happen in the base while I was away? Is your body okay? You didn't look well before." Qiu Lily suddenly thought of something and asked her worriedly. "It's okay for now." Lin Xiao comforted her with a smile. Although she didn't know what little man was doing in her body, it seemed that she had calmed down a little after observing her for the past few days. Except when she needed energy, she would send a hint to Lin Xiao to make her feel that she didn't have enough energy. Elmar also looked at Lin Xiao. Her expression didn't change, and her aura didn't seem to be abnormal. Then she started to talk about the situation in the base. "Everything else is fine. It's just that the population of the base has increased a lot. With more people, there are more thoughts. Some people are interested in our base and think it's good, so they want to replace it." Elmar sneered. She reported the intention of Zhuo Chen's group and their current progress. Then she continued, "If it wasn't for the fact that I want to slap them in the face, I really want to throw them out." Lin Xiao's eyes flashed, and he smiled. "We can't just throw them out. There's no reason to kick them out. It's not good for our base's reputation, and it will affect other survivors joining us in the future. We need evidence to kick them out perfectly." This was also the reason why Yuan Tianqing asked the girls to play games with those people. Chapter 883. Since these people wanted to rob her base, it would be too easy for them to just throw them out. Of course, they couldn't just kill them at this time. Since they couldn't kill them, they would just let these people seek their own deaths. After Elmar and Xiao Lily left, Duan Wan, Xie Dong, and Shen Yuzhen came. These people have been keeping an eye on the cultivation base. I think they're going to use the zombies as an excuse, Shen Yuzhen said. The cultivation base is more than 10 kilometers away from here, and it's not within the safety zone's range. Just ignore them. If they don't want to stay, ask them to leave. But don't let them see the situation in the cultivation base, Lin Xiao said calmly. She didn't have much to worry about when it came to those people. Anyway, these people were on the road to death. Did they think she was easy to bully? Did they want to seduce her, the leader? What kind of trick was that? Was she that easy to fall in love with someone? Lin Xiao felt disgusted just thinking about it. Seeing that Lin Xiao didn't seem to care about these people, Shen Yuzhen said, they couldn't find you, so they planned to get information about you from me, Duan Wan, Miss Wan, and Department Head Lu Jun. The people who were sent to get information about us weren't their subordinates, but the first and second batches of people who came in from the base. From what I've seen these days, they are ready to make a move on Duan Wan. They should be sneaking into your dormitory tonight, Xie Dong, who had been silent all this time, suddenly reminded her. Duan Wan's eyes flashed. She nodded and looked at Lin Xiao and asked, should we fight back? Lin Xiao looked at Xie Dong and asked, who are these people? How strong are they? There's only one level 6 Earth-type metahuman in this group. The rest are level 5. It seems that in order to successfully capture Duan Wan, the level 6 metahuman is going to do it himself. There are 2 other level 5 metahumans working with him, one spirit and the other natural wood, Xie Dong said. Lin Xiao thought about it. It wasn't the right time to let these people fail, but she couldn't let them capture Duan Wan. Let's avoid this time and not alert the enemy. What's the situation with Lu Jun and Wenwen? Lin Xiao said. Lu Jun has been hanging on to Hua Antong. Wenwen has already pretended to be in danger and contacted him, Xie Dong said. Write down the list of people who participated in this matter. Only those who participated and those who knew about it must be dealt with afterward, Lin Xiao said with his arms crossed in front of his chest. Yes. All right, that's all for now. After sending them away, Lin Xiao began to deal with the mountain of official business. There was still a lot of work for her to do, such as reading documents, signing signatures, changing plans, and so on. However, there were still people who did not intend to give her time to do this. I say, since you're back, shouldn't you come to my place for a checkup first? Lin Hao entered the office and closed the door. Then he said in a bad mood. When Lin Xiao saw him, he knew that he had to put down his work for the time being. He spread his hands and said, look at me, I still have so many things to do. Moreover, little man's condition is not abnormal, so I don't need to go to your place. What about you? How are you doing? Ever since you entered the space, you haven't come out for almost a month. Do you know how anxious I am? Lin Hao glared at her, extremely dissatisfied. I'm fine now, aren't I? You can't help me if there's something wrong. Lin Xiao looked at him helplessly. Why did I hear that you came back from outside? Would it kill you to come out of the space and tell me? What kind of expression is that? You think I can't help you? If you don't even let me check your condition, how can I research a treatment method for you? Lin Hao was a little angry. His handsome face was panting with anger. Lin Xiao could only sigh. All right, I got it. In the future, if there's anything wrong with my body, I'll definitely go to you. Is that okay? In the future? So now you still don't plan to go to my place and use the equipment? Lin Hao raised his eyebrows. He had always wanted to know the condition of her body, so that he could think of a solution for her. However, the other party obviously did not care about it. Who was he doing this for? All right, I got it. I'll go with you now, okay? Seeing Lin Hao's expression, Lin Xiao could only put down the work in her hands and go to the hospital with him. After being tormented by Lin Hao using all kinds of equipment for more than an hour, Lin Xiao looked at the sky outside. It was already dark. How is it? Can you see anything? The equipment showed that her physical signs were all static. Apart from the color and state of her body, there was almost no living data. However, after seeing the situation in her uterus, he could not help but be amazed. Look, she has grown a lot. It's so strange, there's no heartbeat, but it can really grow. Looking at the screen of the equipment, a small baby holding a small fist appeared on the screen, curled up into a ball. Lin Xiao stood behind him, her eyes fixed on the little child. Her eyes were shining brightly. After checking that there was nothing wrong with the child, Lin Xiao left Lin Hao's consulting room. After returning to her place, she felt that there was someone in the room before opening the door. Lin Xiao's hand that was unlocking the door paused. Then she opened the door and pushed it in. "What's the matter?" Turning on the light, she looked at the man sitting on the sofa expressionlessly. Wu Qingyue had a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. His eyes just quietly looked at Lin Xiao without saying a word. Lin Xiao glanced at him, walked to the sofa next to him, and sat down. After thinking for a moment, she said, "It wasn't because of you last time. Don't worry about it." She was referring to the last time she suddenly had a fit here. At that time, the man's face was obviously a little scared. She faintly felt that his feelings seemed to be a lot purer for a moment. "I just want to see how the little baby looks." Wu Chengyue smiled faintly and glanced at Lin Xiao's belly. Lin Xiao's belly was a little big now, and she could no longer wear military pants. Therefore, she had already changed before coming back. Lin Xiao, who didn't wear a skirt before, was now wearing a black dress and a pair of black pantyhose. Over the dress, she wore a long, loose brown coat. Lowering her head to touch her belly, Lin Xiao said calmly, "She's fine." For some reason, she suddenly felt that it was normal for Wu Qingyue to care about the child. "What about you?" Wu Qingyue then asked her. He was used to seeing her in her military uniform. Suddenly seeing her in casual clothes like this, he felt a little guilty. Wu Chengyue felt that she had become a lot softer. Today, the man's style was normal. Lin Xiao looked up at him and said, "I'm also fine. By the way, I originally wanted to ask you to borrow the seeds, but I didn't expect you to ask first. Thank you." Chapter 884. Knowing that she was changing the topic, Wu Qingyue's expression didn't change. "You're welcome. After all, we also need to repay." Lin Xiao nodded. The contract he signed with Yuan Tianqing stated that he would give 35% of the annual harvest to Haiqing Base. The two of them suddenly looked at each other in silence for a while. Lin Xiao saw that he seemed to have something to say. She just waited quietly. After waiting for a while, Wu Qingyue finally hesitantly opened his mouth and asked, "Is there a problem with your space?" There was a trace of worry in his eyes as he looked at her. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed and asked, "Why do you ask? Was it because she came back from outside?" But everyone thought that she had sneaked out secretly. Wu Chengyue looked at her and said, "Where you entered the space before, when you came out, you would still be in the same place. But this time you ran out of the base." He didn't say the rest of the sentence, but Lin Xiao could guess what he meant. Wu Qingyue paused and continued, "I waited here every day, but you didn't appear. Even if you wanted to hide, there was no need." Wu Qingyue also didn't think that this female zombie would hide herself as soon as she came out of the space, because she never hid from him, right? Even when he pestered her every day, she only had an indifferent attitude and didn't think about hiding from him. So when this female zombie suddenly came in from outside without warning, Wu Qingyue faintly felt that something was wrong. If it wasn't a problem with her space, then maybe there was a problem with her body. But Lin Xiao didn't want him to know about her situation. Her strength had decreased. She wouldn't be stupid enough to expose this. "If you want to know about my situation, I'm fine now." Lin Xiao looked at him and said. She couldn't understand this man right now, and she couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't do anything after knowing about her situation. She still had to keep a distance from him. Wu Chengyue could feel that she was still keeping a distance from him, but he found that this female zombie might not have noticed it, but she didn't seem to reject him that much. "I want to protect you." Wu Qingyue only said these 5 words, then stood up and turned to leave. "I want to protect you. I won't hurt you. So I want to know about your situation so that I can protect you, right?" He knew that if he said this, it would make the female zombie feel that he was looking down on her. She was a strong-willed woman, so he could only say those 5 words. Although the female zombie's rejection of him had weakened a lot, the trust between the two was still maintained on the basis of cooperation. He really wanted her to take a step back and tell him about her situation, but he knew that she would definitely not say it out loud. Then he could only keep an eye on her. Lin Xiao stared blankly at his tall, silhouette as a trace of confusion flashed across his eyes. Then, he regained his clarity, but his gaze was much calmer. The next day, Lin Xiao began to work as a leader. While going to the cultivation base to investigate the situation, he also approved the official documents. The weather in May and June had already warmed up, and now the survivors in the base were automatically organizing to leave the base to gather supplies. The materials collected could be kept for themselves, and the rest could be handed over to the base to be exchanged for points. In addition, if he didn't need it and didn't want to hand it over to the base, he could also exchange it with others. There were very few people in the base, and there were also very few technicians. The base recruited a large number of technicians and began to research and manufacture some daily necessities, weapons, communication tools, and so on. As for the other bases, they could only nervously study the land and planting, thinking of all kinds of ways to grow normal crops. However, the problems they encountered ranged from not being able to survive to not being able to grow up, or not bearing fruit when they grew up, or being infected and mutated. Apart from the universal base, the other bases were all suppressed by a sense of despair. Only the upper echelons of Haiqing knew that the universal life base's land could be used to grow crops. However, in order to protect the secret of the all-life base, as well as to pacify the emotions of the people, Ocean City decided to do so. He made up a lie to deceive everyone. This lie was actually a half-truth. It told everyone that Sea City had already researched soil that could grow ordinary crops, and that Sea City's food supply would not be cut off in the future. Because of this, the attitude of the people in the Universal Life Base towards the people of Sea City was much better. Therefore, it did not take long for the other bases to receive news that Sea City could grow normal plants. China Base, I've asked around. Sea City doesn't plan to release this technology. Ho Guozhong handed the information to Sikong Chan with a gloomy expression. Not releasing it? Could it be that Sea City wants to watch us starve to death? Sikong Li's face was gloomy, his brows furrowed. A trace of hostility flashed in his eyes. There had been no progress in the past few months of research. China had wasted a lot of seeds to experiment, but they had not been able to grow crops. The problem of the land had not been solved. This made Sikong Chun and the rest of the upper echelons of China Base gloomy. Their words also seemed to be spoken without thinking. In this post-apocalyptic world, the bottom line of morality had long been abandoned. No one wanted to be a saint, and those who had such thoughts would soon be crushed by greed. In order to survive, no one would thank you. They would only feel that what you did was right. The greater the strength, the greater the responsibility. This was the view of humans. He took a deep breath and thought about the lives of more than 1 million people in his base. Sikong Li closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he regained his composure. Send people to contact Sky Fire, Meng Clan, Black Dragon, and Qingshan Base. Since Sea City isn't willing to release the technology, then we can only exchange food with them. Sikong Li said with a stern expression. They contacted these bases because they were in the same situation as China. They were unable to change the soil into organic and healthy soil. In order to obtain food, they had to work with these bases. In order to obtain food, they could only cooperate with Sea City. But the main purpose was to use the strength of the major bases to force Sea City to hand over the technology. I'll make the arrangements now. Ho Guizhong nodded. What they did not know was that Sea City did not have this technology. They only said it to deceive the people in their base to make them feel at ease. Just as China was preparing to cooperate with the other bases to forcefully obtain Sea City's soil purification technology, Zhuochun and the rest of the Universal Base knew that their leader had returned and immediately began the next step. When Zhuochun saw Lin Xiao's fair face from afar, his gaze immediately became greedy and determined to get his hands on her. Chapter 885. However, Lin Xiao's status was too high. It was difficult for Zhuochun to get close to her. The first thing he needed to do was to find a position and quickly climb to the leader's side. That night, Luan brought 2 rank 5 metahumans and other subordinates to ambush Duan Wan in her room, but she did not return. She did not return on the first night, nor the second night, until the third day. What? She left the base for a mission? Why didn't you say so earlier? Luan was furious when he received the news. They hid in the woman's room for 3 days, but she was already sent out of the base. We only received the news today. We don't know why we didn't notice her leaving. The subordinate was also at a loss. The others in the room comforted him. It's okay, although we haven't taken her down yet. Lu Jun and Lin Wanwan are progressing well. Lu Wan's expression softened and asked, "Did you get any information? The female leader has been at the medical center for the past few days, but I heard that there's nothing wrong with her body. I saw her go there. It seems like she's not sick, but to see someone." Everyone understood what he meant. It was obvious that the female leader had a very close relationship with Dr. Lin. It seems like it's true. No wonder she kept her distance from Wu Qingwei. The others said, "If that's the case, why don't we let Zhuo Chun be hospitalized after collecting resources? At least he'll have a chance to get close to her." "That's right. Since she likes to go to the medical department so much, let Zhuo Chun start there." The people in a room excitedly discussed their plans, thinking that these plans would be flawless for the people in the base. However, they did not notice that there was a transparent person standing by the wall in the room. Elmar saw that the people had dispersed, then snuck out of the room. After leaving, she revealed herself and went directly to Lin Xiao's office. The chameleon's ability was very useful for gathering information. On Xie Dong's side, he also received some information from the Huaxia base. TSK, humans will always do such things in order to survive. In any case, the strong are respected in the post-apocalyptic world. Whoever is stronger will have better resources. She heard that the Huaxia base was going to cooperate with Haicheng to make a deal, and secretly wanted to purify the land. Lin Xiao said indifferently. She had expected such a day to come. After all, in order to survive, humans would always try their best. If those people could peacefully trade with Sea City, they might be able to live in peace. If they dare to act recklessly, then the Universal Base would not put Ocean City in a disadvantageous position. After all, their two bases were now in the same boat. If something happened to Sea City, the Universal Base would soon be exposed. The technology of the Huaxia base was very mature, and most of the materials could be produced directly. Although Haicheng's scientific research had also made progress, the results were not as good as those in China. Will they arrive at Sea City? Lin Xiao asked. The leader of Huaxia is currently discussing with the leaders of the other bases. The results are not out yet, Xie Dong said. Lin Xiao nodded. Got it. Keep an eye on them. Xie Dong nodded and left. Elmar knocked on the door again and entered. What do you think? How are they going to get close to me? Lin Xiao looked at her and casually asked while flipping through the documents. They said that you and Dr. Lin are too close. Seeing that you often go to the medical department, Zhuo Chun is going to get injured before entering the hospital. Then, he will find an opportunity to appear in front of you. They're always using the same methods, nothing new. Elmar sat on the chair in front of her desk and said with a disdainful expression, "That's because we have long seen through their intentions and plans. If we didn't see it clearly and catch them off guard, we would really fall into their trap. Isn't that right?" Lin Xiao smiled faintly. Back then, Yuan Tianqing fell into their trap. Lu Tong wasn't a powerful person, but he was a little smarter. He knew that first impressions were the strongest, so Yuan Tianqing always thought of him as a weak and kind person. It could only be said that his acting skills were not bad. If it wasn't for Lin Wanwan coincidentally seeing through the problem, Yuan Tianqing would have been slept by him in the end. Elmar thought about what she said and nodded in agreement. That's true. Although Lu Jun's surname, Hua has been using the topic of the cultivation base to get close to her, he has been secretly asking about you. In their eyes, you are too secretive. Lin Xiao shrugged and said, If I don't be secretive and let them know that we are all zombies, wouldn't I be scared to death? Then they would run out and find the whole world to deal with me? Elmar suddenly said, But this surname Hua is a little strange. Since he's been bought over by Lu Wan and the others, he actually knows a lot about the cultivation base, but he hasn't revealed it to those people. Why is that? He really only revealed things about you. just like the conditions of his deal with Lu Wan and the others. He didn't say anything else. Lin Xiao looked at her and shook her head. How would I know? Maybe he has his own considerations. In everyone's eyes, Wu Changyue seemed to be staying at the cultivation base. Although he didn't crazily pester their beautiful leader like before, he seemed to be maintaining a subtle distance from her. Their leader had a close relationship with Dr. Lin in the cultivation base, so the three of them began to have a strange atmosphere of a love triangle. Only those who knew Lin Xiao's identity were speechless. Say, why do you think our leader threw the handsome, gentle, and powerful leader Wu aside and fell in love with our Dr. Lin? Although Dr. Lin is pretty good-looking, her strength is too far away from leader Wu. I just feel like she's not good enough for our leader, Hua Antong said to Lu Jun in a joking tone while sitting in the cafeteria. Lu Jun fed her son and glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. She said indifferently, "That's the leader's business. Why do you care so much?" Although he was talking about the recent gossip in the cultivation base, how could Lu Jun not know that he was trying to pull the topic to Lin Xiao so that he could get some other information? As expected, Hua Antong said, "I just feel that our leader is so young, beautiful, and powerful. She wouldn't fall for someone like Dr. Lin, right? Does the leader like someone else? I feel like she's with Dr. Lin to get rid of leader Wu." Lu Jun's eyes flickered, but they were covered by her curly eyelashes. She blinked and said, "You care about the leader so much. Do you like her too?" Hua Antong was stunned for a moment and quickly shook his head. "Oh no, the leader can only be watched from afar, not played with. Bah no, powerful people are worthy of respect. I admire her." Chapter 886. I mean, Captain Hua, you've been very free lately. Why do you keep coming to my place? Do you also know the situation in the cultivation base? Lu Jun glanced at him again, then turned his head and continued to feed his son. "Seems like I'm not welcome." What Antong smiled helplessly. "We don't know each other well," Lu Jun reminded him. If they weren't close, some things shouldn't be asked casually. What Antong couldn't maintain his smile. Seeing that Lu Jun didn't care about him and only cared about feeding his son, he took a deep breath and left with a smile. Lu Jun's lips curled into a cold smile as he watched him leave. A strange light flashed in her eyes under the contact lenses. On the other hand, Hua Antong's face was gloomy. He didn't expect the woman to be so vigilant. She would immediately interrupt him if he tried to talk about the leader. It was as if she was guarding against him. No, that was impossible. She didn't know his intentions. Why would she guard against him? It was probably just her instinctive sense of defense. On the other hand, Xiedong suddenly entered Lin Xiao's office. "Leader, I heard that the people in Sea City found something. If I'm not wrong, it's useful for crazy mutants." "What is it?" Lin Xiao looked at him in surprise. "It's a type of stone. The news came from Sea City. It was said that not long ago, they discovered a type of stone that disappeared after being eaten by a berserk mutated beast. So, Sea City is sending people to look for it." Although Xiedong was expressionless, his eyes were bright. "Where's the location?" Lin Xiao asked. "I heard it's near Lake Tai," Xiedong said. Lin Xiao frowned and said, "If it's Lake Tai, we need to ask the people from Sea City to go with us." Because the area had been divided, Lake Tai wasn't their territory. It belonged to Sea City. In order to avoid conflict, it was better to ask. In fact, this kind of request was just a greeting for the current cooperation between the two bases. There was no problem. What made Lin Xiao frown was that the location was near Lake Tai. In that case, the danger level of this operation might be a little high, and it was also very far away. "I'll go too." Just then, a voice came from outside the door. Lin Xiao and Xiedong turned to look. He saw Long Xiantong standing at the door, and the two of them walked in after noticing him. Lin Xiao looked at him in surprise. "You want to go?" Long Xiantong nodded and said, "I'll be able to find it more accurately if I go." Lin Xiao looked at Xiedong. "Is the information accurate?" Xiedong nodded. Lin Xiao thought about it and nodded. "All right, I'll go talk to Wu Changyue. But Minister Lung, you are a researcher of our base. You must be careful and protect your own life first." Lung Xiantong smiled. "I know. Although the stone that could suppress the madness of metahumans was important, as a scientist, Lung Xiantong was even more important. Lin Xiao knew that it was not safe for him to go. He was afraid that if he did not go, the people he sent to look for him might not be able to find him. If that happened, it would cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, with the scientists following them, the process would be very fast. Before Lin Xiao went to look for him, Wu Qingyue appeared in Lin Xiao's office in the afternoon. "I heard that you're going to send people to Lake Tai." Wu Qingyue sat on the sofa and looked at Lin Xiao as soon as he entered. Lin Xiao looked up from the pile of documents and glanced at him before burying his head again. "Yes, is your information accurate? I'm not sure about that. After all, the information was sent back by those corpse hunters. This is the first time they sent back information, and it's from an amateur. Only experts in this field would be able to find out." Wu Qingyue shrugged. The corpse hunters used this information to exchange for quite a lot of credits from the base. In Universal Base, it was points, and in Haicheng, it was called credits. Every base had a different name, but it was considered a form of contribution to the base. In Huaxia, it was called contribution. Although the name was different, the function was the same. Just like currency, it could be exchanged for anything. You could buy anything you wanted, as long as you had enough contribution. When Lin Xiao heard Wu Qingyue's words, he knew that the other party had already agreed to travel together. He nodded and said, "You have more scientists on your side. Send more people. I'll send a few people to buy some soy sauce." What he said was a little unfair, but Lin Xiao was not wrong. It was just that when they went there, the information found by both parties would be shared. As for who would find more valuable things, it would depend on each party's ability. Although Lin Xiao's words were a little unfair, she did not really want to take advantage of him. At the very least, she planned to make it up to him in other ways. What opinion could Wu Qingyue have? He could not wait for Lin Xiao to take advantage of him more and more. Only they themselves knew what was going on in their minds. However, Lin Xiao's next words made him feel helpless. "As compensation, I can give you a batch of our base's healing potions." Wu Qingyue knew that she was referring to the potion that could slow down the awakening of metahumans, but he did not know that it was the person in the lake in her space. But for Wu Qingyue, he knew that the effects of the potion were not limited to that. Whether it was for metahumans or ordinary people, it was very useful. In this apocalyptic world, where there was a lack of medicine, it could be said to be very precious. Seeing that Wu Qingyue did not say anything, Lin Xiao thought that he had agreed to this condition. In any case, they did not lose out, so she would not take advantage of others. By the way, have you thought about how to deal with China's purpose? They are secretly here for your land purification technology. Lin Xiao suddenly thought of what Xie Dong had said and looked at Wu Qingyue. She knew that Wu Qingyue should have received the news. If Haicheng's cover was exposed, then Huaxiao would definitely find out about the universal base very quickly. However, she was just asking and did not worry much. Although Xikong Chun was not simple, Wu Qingyue was not a simple person either. The methods and intelligence of the two were actually about the same, but because Wu Qingyue's metahuman strength was slightly stronger, there was a faint trend of him suppressing Xikong Chun. "Don't worry, I will take care of it. They will not dare to use force unless they want to run out of food. Besides, they will not be able to get what they want even if they use force." Wu Qingyue smiled faintly. His gaze towards Lin Xiao deepened. Lin Xiao felt that his gaze seemed to be hinting at something, so she lowered her head to avoid his gaze and continued to sign. "Yes, I'm just worried about being targeted by the people from China. After all, my small base cannot afford to be tossed around." Seeing that she avoided his gaze, a trace of sadness flashed through Wu Qingyue's eyes. However, he quickly returned to normal and smiled gently without saying anything. Chapter 887. A few days later, Lin Feng and Lin Wenwen came back. However, they didn't get much, and many people were injured. When Lin Feng came to report to Lin Xiao, he sat on the chair and said expressionlessly, "The mutant plants outside are growing very fast, and many of the mutant beasts are in a berserk state. Their destructive power is double that of normal." If it was in the mountains, most of the mutated beasts were from wild animals. If it was in the city, cats and dogs were more common, and there were also mice. Also, the mutated insects seemed to have evolved to a higher level than before. Most of them are poisonous, and we were attacked by poisonous insects a few times. Lin Feng frowned when he talked about the mutated insects. Mutated insects? Lin Xiao's expression became serious. Lin Feng nodded. Many mutated insects can emit poisonous gas. If you're not careful, you'll be poisoned. And some of them are very big. Lin Xiao could imagine that they were big. After all the mutated beasts were big. However, the ones that emitted poisonous gas were more dangerous. Lin Feng had mentioned it, so the situation wasn't simple. Is it serious? Lin Xiao looked at him and asked. Lin Feng nodded. Although there were mutated insects in the past, they didn't affect the environment. Now, they have seriously affected the environment. The air around them is poisonous. If animals or humans breathe it in, there will be different degrees of effects. These effects aren't good. Affect the environment? Lin Xiao was surprised. This was serious. The environment affected by the virus was already very bad. How did these mutated insects evolve to affect the environment? There were thousands of species of insects on Earth. If this continued, the danger level of the outside world would increase again. We've encountered this phenomenon 6 times, and the affected areas are big and small. The degree of poisoning also varies, but no one has died yet. But in the future, we might have to be extra careful when we leave the base. Lin Feng sighed, feeling tired when he said this. Lin Xiao looked at him and said calmly, I think, even without these new changes, we still have to be extra careful with the zombies and mutated plants and animals. Now, the danger level has increased by 1 level, but it's still full of danger. Generally speaking, for our situation, we only need to guard against natural crises if we get rid of the zombies. Lin Feng followed her words and thought about it. Well, maybe it was because the harvest from this mission was not good and many people were injured. The situation was gloomy, which made him feel a little gloomy. He was taking things too seriously. All right, you can go back and rest. Lin Xiao smiled at him. After Lin Feng left, Lin Xiao asked Xin Yuzhen to find Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying. This time, Long Xiantong is going to Lake Tai. The 2 of you should follow him. You have to go to the secondary sect to experience it. The main force is also people from Sea City. However, for your safety, I will also send people to protect your lives in secret. Lin Xiao looked at the 2 girls and said she would send Lin Kuei and 2 level 1 kings to lurk around the team and attack when there was any danger. Lin Wenwen looked at her speechlessly. It's not that far, just over 100 kilometers. Long Qingying was expressionless. Lin Xiao glanced at Lin Wenwen from the corner of his eyes. If you don't drag us down the whole time, it won't be too far. Although it was only 100 kilometers, once they left the base, there were zombie viruses, mutated plants and animals, and now there were large numbers of mutated poisonous insects. If they were not careful along the way, they would lose their lives in these dangers. Lin Wenwen could see the warning in Lin Xiao's eyes and immediately realized that he was being too careless. His expression immediately changed, and he nodded carefully. Oh, I understand. Lin Xiao passed the team list to the 2 of them. Other than the 2 of them and Long Xiantong, there were more than 10 people following them. Lin Wenwen didn't expect to be given another mission as soon as he returned to the base. However, he could avoid the person who took the opportunity to get close to her. Hence, Lu Wan and the others were waiting for Hua Antong to get some information about the female leader from Lu Jun. In the end, there was no progress on Hua Antong's side. Lin Wenwen's people had finally gotten close to her, but before they could progress to the next step to gain her trust, Lin Wenwen had another mission. Why did she leave again? What mission is she in such a hurry for? Lu Wan's face was gloomy, and he was gritting his teeth. Lin Wenwen left very quickly this time, and it seemed to be a special mission. Her whereabouts were also confidential, so the people Lu Wan sent to get close to her couldn't follow her anymore. They thought there would be some progress, but they were stuck here again. Is there any useful information from Hua Antong? He has been with that woman for so long, but he can't get anything out of her. Why didn't I know he was a useless person? Luan continued to speak in a gloomy tone. No, he said that the woman is very tight-lipped. In order to not arouse the other party's suspicion, Antong didn't push her too hard. Luan, I think he's right. We can't push her too hard. We have to take it slowly, the others said. We can't do it here or there. Then we can only wait for Zhuo to come back and directly approach that woman. Luan said in annoyance, and his eyes were a little cold. Not long after, he received news that Zhuo had returned to the base. Brother Wan, Zhuo really went to the hospital. When his subordinate came to report, his tone was a little strange. Didn't he want to go in anyway? Why are you making a fuss? Luan looked at his subordinate strangely. No, he really went in. The subordinate couldn't think of the right words for a moment, and after thinking for a while, he said loudly, no, Zhuo was really poisoned. He was sent back by his subordinates. He's still unconscious right now. I heard from a hospital that he might have been poisoned by a mutated worm, and we don't know when he will wake up. After saying that in one breath, the subordinate immediately shut his mouth and looked at Luan nervously. Luan, what? Poisoned? He was dumbfounded and didn't know how to react. However, his brain had already reacted and started to think quickly. Then he thought that if Zhuo was poisoned and unconscious, then he wouldn't be able to approach the female leader. If he didn't go, did he have to send someone else? Luan thought about the others, and then he thought about himself. Luan raised his hand and rubbed his hair with a toothache. He was older, so the female leader didn't like him at all. The others were either plain, ugly, or had no temperament or aura. The female leader didn't like them either. What the hell was going on? Chapter 888. Lin Xiao looked at Elmar amusedly and said, So, Zhuo is lying in the medical ward and won't wake up? Elmar nodded and said, I heard that his condition isn't good. I don't know if he will wake up or if he will remain unconscious. Fortunately, his life isn't in danger. I just don't know if the medicine used to maintain his vitality is enough. How is it not enough? It's just to maintain his bodily functions. The medical department won't be too troubled. Lin Xiao smiled nonchalantly. Although they had found a lot of usable equipment in the medical center of the base, there were fewer and fewer drugs. Due to the lack of raw materials, almost all the medicinal herbs were mutated. This time, Long Xiantong didn't just go out to find the stone that could suppress berserk. He also went out to look for medicine. However, the medicinal herbs now weren't the same as before. In a world where mutated plants were everywhere, they could only look for mutated plants with special value. From another perspective, mutated plants weren't all harmful to humans. Some are poisonous, but medicine had 3 parts of poison. It was medicine only if it was used in the right place. However, Lin Xiao had been providing energy lake water to the medical department. The other bases lacked medicine, but Lin Xiao only lacked some special medicinal herbs. At least her lake water could stimulate the human body's natural self-healing system and restore bodily functions. I'm still waiting for Zhuo to approach me. All right, I haven't even made a move, and he's already digging his own grave. Lin Xiao shrugged and looked a little regretful. Elmar looked at her curiously with her green eyes. You seem to be looking forward to it. Lin Xiao smiled. I've already made preparations. I was just afraid that he wouldn't come. But now he really isn't coming. Didn't I prepare for nothing? Elmar nodded and asked again. Maybe they will send someone else. Lin Xiao nodded. Maybe we can't rule out that possibility. Continue to keep an eye on them. I'm curious what they will do next. Luan didn't know that they were being watched. After knowing that Zhuo was poisoned and unconscious, the plan to approach the female leader had to be put on hold. They couldn't find a suitable candidate, so they could only suppress it for now. Although they had temporarily stopped their plan to approach Lin Xiao, they hadn't given up on the cultivation base. I only promised to give you information on our leader. I didn't promise anything else, what Antong said with a cold smile. But you haven't given us any useful information. Your progress is too slow. Luan's expression was cold. He wanted to know something about the cultivation base from Antong, but Antong didn't give him any face at all. Although Lu Wan had heard from the other workers that the plantation was in Wushan, the people he had sent there had never returned. He knew that the security there was very tight. However, after the second outbreak, the base no longer organized workers to plant. So, is the cultivation base still in operation? Can it still be produced? Moreover, they had received news from Sea City and other bases that all the land could no longer be used to grow normal crops. If they were planted, they would either die or mutate. There was no way to harvest them normally. You didn't say that there was a time limit, did you? If I have information, I will naturally give it to you. If it isn't within my scope, I won't give it to you. Huantong's expression was somewhat sarcastic. He knew what these people wanted, and he was laughing at them for overestimating themselves. They dared to have ideas on the leader of the base. They didn't even know how much they were worth. Did they really think that the female leader of the base was a newcomer? Or did they think that the base could be built because of Sea City's help? Leader Wu of Sea City had indeed helped a lot, but the people of the base also saw the female leader's strength in their eyes. If she didn't have this strength, Wu Qingwei wouldn't have cooperated with her. Hua Antong actually didn't want to accept this business, but he really did need level 5 zombie cores. He saw that the other party said that they had level 5 zombie cores to exchange for the female leader's secret information. Level 5 zombies weren't easy to kill, so level 5 zombie cores were naturally more precious. It wouldn't be too much to exchange for secret information on the female leader. However, Hua Antong didn't want to give up this opportunity to get level 5 zombie cores. He just wasn't that persistent. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have enough points, he wouldn't have paid attention to these people. On the other hand, Hua Antong was also curious about what kind of person their female leader was. He didn't even know her name. Everyone called her Miss Lu. Hearing his words, Lu Wan's expression became a bit ugly. Don't you want the zombie cores? Hua Antong looked at him with a funny expression. Do you think that if I tell you the situation of the cultivation base, you will directly give me level 5 zombie cores? Lu Wan silently stared at him. Of course not. How could a level 5 zombie core be worth the price of cultivation base? However, according to the situation of other bases, it was obvious that the cultivation base's situation wouldn't be any better. Right now, most of the survivors in the base were still working on the wall construction site of the second base. Only some ability users who didn't want to do this kind of work would leave the base to hunt zombies, because the things they could get out of the city were much more valuable than working on the construction site. Now, all the major bases were still buying large amounts of zombie cores or energy cores because the energy converter developed by the base in China was to convert these energy cores or zombie cores into electricity and voltage. Therefore, in addition to the development of solar energy, the energy converter had gradually replaced the previous energy sources such as diesel, gas, and oil. It was just that this technology was currently only available in China, and they didn't intend to exchange it. But they could exchange the machines. Haiqing had always been cooperating with China and had exchanged a lot of energy converter. Therefore, the Universal Base had also exchanged a lot from Haiqing. Otherwise, the current equipment to collect solar energy wouldn't be able to supply the entire base's electricity, because there were too many people. Leng Xianong and Lin Wenwen brought Li Zhang's team to Haiqing. You're also in this mission? On the way to Haicheng, Lin Wenwen looked at Kong Qingming, who was also returning to Haiqing from the Universal Base with them. And yes, I'm the person in charge. Kong Qingming's exquisite facial features raised into a natural smile. He looked at Long Qingying, who was standing beside Lin Wenwen with her back facing him. He didn't tell Lin Wenwen that after knowing about this mission, he was the one who took the initiative to ask Wu Changyue to lead the team. Oh, Lin Wenwen followed his gaze and turned to look at Long Qingying, but only saw that her back was facing him and her long hair was tied up high at the back of her head. Lin Wenwen turned back and rolled his eyes at Kong Qingming. Kong Qingming immediately retracted his gaze and looked elsewhere. Chapter 889. After Leng Xuantong's exploration team left the base, nothing happened in the base. It was just that a certain leader kept staying in someone else's base as if he didn't need to deal with his own affairs. Lin Xiao was a little jealous that he had a leader to help him deal with his work. Fortunately, Wu Chunghua didn't do anything else other than staying in her base. She couldn't just chase him away, otherwise, it would be disrespectful. It was raining outside, and there was water vapor in the air. However, the water vapor was acidic. The rain wasn't good for the human body and could easily make people sick. In fact, it wasn't good for the plants that didn't mutate either. At least after the rain, the crops in the base would get sick again. Fortunately, Lin Xiao's lake energy could remove this. She just needed to sprinkle the lake water on the plants before they died after the rain stopped. Rumble, rumble. A muffled sound came from the dark sky, and lightning streaked across the sky from time to time. Rumble, rumble. Gradually, the thunder became more intense, and the lightning became more frequent. Lin Xiao sat in front of the office desk and looked up. She stood up, wearing a thin black suit jacket with a white loose skirt inside. The weather was hot, and her legs could be seen. She was wearing a pair of flat leather shoes. Now, she was dressed like a businesswoman before the apocalypse. She didn't have the sharpness of a leader in the apocalypse. She walked to the window and stood up. As she walked, her lower abdomen could be seen occasionally. She stood by the window and looked up at the thunderclouds in the sky. She realized that the thunderclouds seemed to be getting thicker, and there was a sense of oppression coming from above. It made Lin Xiao feel a little uneasy. It was raining heavily outside, and the water vapor caused the temperature to drop a lot. To a normal person, it might be a little cold, but Lin Xiao didn't feel much. At this moment, a bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the sky. Boom! Bang! Although Lin Xiao was in the second base, her hearing was extraordinary, and she could hear sound from a few kilometers away. Moreover, from this scream, she could determine where the lightning bolt had landed. Her heart skipped a beat, and she had a bad feeling. It can't be. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao turned around and strode out of the door. Prepare the car. Hurry. She asked Shen Yuzhen to prepare the car. Shen Yuzhen saw that her expression suddenly became dignified and knew that she had thought of something important. She immediately turned around and trotted down to prepare the car. Lin Xiao's walking speed was very fast, but his steps were also very steady. He didn't look messy at all. Very soon, she arrived downstairs. Shen Yuzhen held an umbrella over her head and let her get into the car outside the gate. After Shen Yuzhen got into the car, the driver immediately stepped on the accelerator and drove towards the car. Boom! Another clap of thunder sounded. Lin Xiao sat in the back seat with a frown. He turned his head to look out the window. It was dark outside, and the rain kept hitting the car window, then slid down along with the air. Boom! Boom! Amidst the muffled sounds of thunder, Lin Xiao's car stopped beside a building. Hurry up and evacuate the people. Retreat 500 meters away from here. As soon as they got out of the car, they saw a hole in the roof of the building. Thick smoke was rising from it. She didn't ask anything and immediately ordered the people around her to evacuate the people who were running out. There weren't many people in this building, but there were still about 100 people living here. The lowest floor was where Wu Qinghua lived. Needless to say, the closer Lin Xiao got, the more she could feel an energy riot coming from the top of the building. She could also sense that this power was being suppressed by someone, but it was clear that the suppression was not strong enough. Soon, Elmar and Xiao Lily appeared beside Lin Xiao. What's going on? Did he go crazy? Xiao Lily stood on a rock next to Lin Xiao. Although she was standing in the rainwater evaporated when it fell on her body. The rain didn't wet her clothes. Elmar was covered with a layer of energy, isolating the rainwater. Lin Xiao was still in the umbrella. She couldn't use her energy to isolate the rainwater. She didn't have any energy. Let's go up and take a look. It's best to lure him out of the base. If he acts up here, it won't be good. Lin Xiao looked up at the room upstairs and said. She suddenly rushed up the stairs. The building was surrounded by tall buildings. There were no short buildings or trees. Lin Xiao couldn't jump to the top of the building where Wu Qinghua was. She could only jump about 10 meters high, but the building was 50 to 60 meters high. She could only take the stairs. She couldn't even use the elevator. Without the energy of his special ability, he couldn't even jump high. Elmar and Xiao Lily were much more relaxed. Qiu Lily directly used her wind energy, while Elmar climbed up the wall like a big gecko. But she was invisible, so no one could see her. Qiu Lily flew to Wu Qingyue's room and carefully landed on the balcony, but she couldn't get in. It wasn't because the door was locked, but because the raging energy in the room formed an energy wave. It prevented Qiu Lily from approaching. The energy wave brought along an invisible gust of wind, causing Qiu Lily's white dress and her 2 long ponytails to flutter in the wind. Her body was also pushed outwards by a force. Qiu Lily raised her hand in front of her face. She wanted to enter the room, but she couldn't withstand the force. Every time she took a step forward, she would be pushed back 2 steps in the next second. Elmar quickly climbed up, but she was weaker than Qiu Lily. At least Qiu Lily could get close to the door, but Elmar could only stand outside the balcony railing and couldn't move at all. Damn, this is bad. How are we going to lure him out? What if he got angry and flared up? Does he still have a mind? Elmar let out a strange cry with a depressed expression. She couldn't do it. Qiu Lily used her arm to block the wind and tried to look at the person in the room. She saw that the man was squatting on the floor with Wu Yueling in his arms. He was trying his best to endure something. His face was blue and the veins on his forehead were bulging. His eyes were wide open and his eyes were bloodshot. Lingling is still inside. She seems to have fainted, Qiu Lily exclaimed. Her words seemed to have triggered something. The energy in the room suddenly rose. Bang! The 2 people on the balcony were directly thrown out by an invisible force. Fortunately, both of them reacted quickly. One somersaulted in midair and immediately stabilized his body in midair, while the other flipped down from a building that was tens of stories high. Then he nimbly twisted his body in midair and landed easily. Chapter 890. Lin Qiao bitterly climbed more than 30 floors before he finally reached the top. As soon as she entered the corridor, she was immediately suppressed by the energy pressure. She quickly calmed herself down and retracted her aura, relying on her body to support herself. After standing at the edge of the energy and adapting for a while, Lin Qiao immediately realized that it wasn't that difficult anymore. She lifted her legs and walked towards the door of the house. The suite was accessible from all directions because the glass windows and doors were blasted open by his energy. At this moment, Lin Qiao was holding onto the wall and stepping on the door on the floor to get closer. When she saw Wu Changyue squatting in the living room with Wu Yueling in his arms, she was stunned and her expression changed. It seemed like he was trying so hard to suppress himself because of Wu Yueling. Wu Changyue instinctively didn't want to hurt his daughter, so even if he lost his mind, he would try his best to avoid his daughter. But looking at Wu Yueling's closed eyes, Lin Qiao didn't know what Wu Yueling's current situation was. But fortunately, her aura was still alive and hadn't disappeared. Lin Qiao stood at the door vigilantly, although she was very close to Wu Changyue. But the surrounding energy didn't seem to cause any harm to her. It was just that the resistance was a little strong. She suddenly didn't know how to save Wu Yueling from Wu Qingyue's crazy state. What if he went crazy and did something bad? It seemed like Lung Xuantong's previous test had deviated from their original guess. Although there were hidden dangers, it acted up too quickly. When Wu Changyue went for the test, he said that there were no problems. Could they not let metahumans get close to children in the future? Otherwise, no one would know when these metahumans would suddenly act up. As if sensing Lin Qiao, Wu Changyue suddenly slowly raised his head and looked towards the door. Lin Qiao looked at his eyes. The outer circle of his eyes was red, but it wasn't the kind of red that covered the white of his eyes. Instead, it was a faint blush that spread from the eyeball to the outside, from deep to shallow. The outer part of his eyeball was dark red, and the more it looked, the lighter it became. His eyes were cold and emotionless. He looked at Lin Qiao as if she was a stranger. But Lin Qiao could vaguely see that there seemed to be an unconscious defense under his cold eyes. It felt like he was protecting his child. Lin Qiao looked at him in surprise. This person had already lost his mind, yet he still remembered to protect his daughter. Xiao Liqing, who was downstairs, had just returned from outside when he saw the situation in the building. The building was silent, but there was a charred spot on a roof that was smoking. It looked like an explosion had happened there. Rumble. At this moment, a muffled rumble of thunder came from the clouds in the sky. Xiao Liqing cursed inwardly and prepared to rush in. You can't go in now. Lingling is with Wu Changyue. It'll be a mess if we go with more people. It'll be bad if he overreacts. Elmar suddenly appeared and stopped Xiao Liqing. Lingling's up there. Xiao Liqing was shocked, his eyes widening in panic. However, he did not dare to go up again. His aura might really cause the mad leader to become agitated. On the rooftop, Lin Xiao didn't dare to move after Wu Qinghua looked at him. The energy in the room was wreaking havoc. The furniture and other things were all smashed into a pile of debris. The whole room was a scene of devastation. Seeing that Wu Changyue maintained his instincts to protect Lingling, Lin Xiao was surprised and relieved. However, she was troubled about what to do next. It seemed like Wu Qingyue would not let go of Lingling of his own accord. Just when Lin Xiao thought that Wu Changyue would not let go of Lingling of his own accord, Wu Changyue suddenly moved. He stood up with Lingling in his arms. Fortunately, the way he carried Lingling was the same as before, and he didn't just randomly carry her. Wu Qinghua looked at Lin Xiao expressionlessly. His eyes were cold. Suddenly, he raised his head slightly and sniffed in Lin Xiao's direction. Lin Xiao looked at him. Other people's eyes were crazy. But when it came to him, why was his gaze so cold? Even Lin Xiao felt a chill down her spine when she was being stared at like this. The people at the top of the stairs moved slightly. Lin Xiao quickly put her hand behind her back and gestured for them to not move. Duan Wan immediately raised her hand and gestured for the people behind her to step back. She also moved back behind the corner of the wall. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Yueling, who was in Wu Qingyue's arms. Her small body was limp and motionless in Wu Qingyue's arms. Her eyes were closed, and her soft long hair was scattered messily behind her. He was less than 3 meters away from her, but Lin Xiao could not sense his thoughts, nor could she see anything from his eyes. After thinking for a while, Lin Xiao tried to say, "You don't want to hurt Lingling, right?" Her voice was calm and even a little soft. Perhaps Wu Changyue still had a trace of his instinctive rationality. Otherwise, he would not have suppressed his energy. As expected, after hearing what she said, Wu Qingyue's eyes flashed. He looked at her hesitantly and blankly. It worked. Lin Xiao was happy. She continued to say softly, "Put Lingling down. You will definitely hurt her if you keep staying with her." However, after she said that, Wu Qingyue's gaze immediately became a little guarded. He looked at Lin Xiao with a kind of distrust, as if he was looking at a liar. Lin Xiao, who felt like she had become a liar, was speechless. However, in order to lure Lingling away from this human-shaped energy bomb, she could only pretend to be a liar. "Put her down. I will leave with you. I won't hurt her. Don't worry. If you don't leave, you will be the one who will hurt her. Do you want Lingling to die?" Lin Xiao stared at him. The last sentence was a little hard. Wu Qingyue's eyes showed a struggling expression. Clearly, he could understand Lin Xiao's words. However, he could not control what he wanted to do. Lin Xiao persisted and said, "If you don't want to hurt Lingling, put her down." The struggle in Wu Qingyue's eyes became more intense. However, he loosened his grip a little. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed. She repeated, "If you don't want to hurt her, put her down." Wu Qingyue finally looked away from Lin Xiao. He looked down at Lingling in his arms and then looked up at Lin Xiao. It seemed like he wanted Lin Xiao to promise him. Lin Xiao nodded and said, "Put her down. Otherwise, you will regret it." Wu Qingyue began to bend down. He looked at Lin Xiao from time to time. After confirming that she would not come in, he slowly put Lingling down. Lin Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. At that moment, Wu Qingyue, who had just put Lingling down, suddenly flashed and appeared in front of Lin Xiao. A wave of violent energy came crashing down. Lin Xiao's heart was alarmed. She reacted quickly and retreated. In the end, she was still a little too slow. She felt her neck tighten, and a strong force locked her neck tightly. Chapter 891. Bang! The window at the end of the corridor was smashed open. Lin Xiao was sent flying out of the window by Wu Qingyue's grip on her throat. Lin Xiao, who couldn't breathe, didn't have much of a reaction to Wu Qingyue's grip on her throat. However, Wu Qingyue was using a lot of strength and was tightly gripping her neck. Her body wasn't weak, so Wu Qingyue couldn't break her neck even if he wanted to. When she flew out of the building, Lin Xiao grabbed the arm of the hand that was gripping her neck. Then, she flipped her body and quickly wrapped her legs around Wu Qingyue's shoulders. Using his body to turn around, she skillfully let go of Wu Qingyue's hand. After her neck was freed, Lin Xiao quickly kicked Wu Qingyue's chest and flipped away. Lin Xiao's movements were very fast. The two of them separated in midair. When they landed, Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue were separated by more than 10 meters. When Duanwan and the others saw Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue fly out of the window, they immediately rushed into the house to carry Wu Yueling and quickly left the place. After Wu Qingyue landed, Elmar immediately turned invisible and sneaked behind him. However, as soon as she went behind Wu Qingyue's cold face immediately turned around and stared at Elmarch. Elmar's heart skipped a beat. Fuck, could he sense her? On the other side, after Lin Xiao landed, she quickly retreated. Her current combat strength was too low, so she wasn't suitable for a fight. Anyway, with Elmar and Qiu Lili around, she could retreat a little. Not to mention for the little man in her stomach. Even if she recovered to her previous state, she wouldn't dare to fight Wu Qingyue head-on. However, just as Lin Xiao retreated a meter, Wu Qingyue suddenly turned around and stared at her. He didn't care about Elmar, who was behind him. His figure flashed and flashed toward Lin Xiao again. Lin Xiao was shocked. Oh my god, why are you staring at me again? She quickly turned around and rushed out of the base. Fortunately, although her energy was gone, she still had her speed. She could still run and jump very quickly. But this was just as well. Since Wu Qingyue had his eyes on her, she could lead him out of the base. Rumble, Wu Qingyue's figure kept chasing behind, and the thunder above his head immediately began to follow his position. Although Lin Xiao was not slow, Wu Qingyue was faster, because he still had the energy of his special ability that he could use. Elmar, who was behind them, did not dare to get too close. After all, Wu Qingyue's energy waves were no joke. Wherever he passed, the buildings and the debris on the ground were all sent flying and shattered into small pieces in midair. However, the lightning in the sky did not fall for a long time. Although everyone was on tenterhooks, they were also relieved at the same time. Everyone was speechless as they watched Wu Qingyue chase after Lin Xiao. This leader, Wu, had already lost all rationality, yet he was still chasing after their leader. Was there need to give up so easily? No one present was a match for Wu Qingyue. So now, they could only rely on their leader to deal with this crazy lightning ability user. Seeing Lin Xiao lead Wu Qingyue out of the city, they thought there was a way to get him outside and subdue him. However, they did not know that Lin Xiao, who was quickly dodging left and right to avoid Wu Qingyue's attacks while moving out of the base, was currently in a very difficult situation. She could only lead him outside and then directly enter the space. However, they did not know where she would run to after coming out of the space. Just as Lin Xiao was about to lead the person who was about to start the lightning attack outside, Wu Qingyue, who was behind her, pounced a few times but failed to catch her. He appeared to be a little irritated. Boom! Bang! A moderate lightning descended from the sky, but it only struck in front of Lin Xiao and did not strike her. Lin Xiao, who was moving forward, looked up at the sky. Then, without looking back, she quickly stepped on the edge of a nearby building and used the force to jump forward in the blink of an eye. She did not know if Wu Qingyue still had a trace of rationality left. Although the energy around his body was chaotic, it did not attract the lightning in the sky. While Wu Qingyue still had a trace of rationality, Lin Xiao quickly lured him out of the base. The soldiers at the gate of the city wall only saw a figure rushing over at a speed too fast for the naked eye to follow. Then, the figure jumped onto the roof of a car and jumped out. Then, he jumped onto a telephone pole and directly jumped onto the wall from the telephone pole. This time, they saw a little more clearly. It seemed to be a woman. However, they could not see clearly who it was. They only saw the hem of her clothes and flying long hair. Then, she disappeared from the top of the wall. Then, another figure rushed up the wall with a violent energy and chased after the woman in front of it. When Lin Xiao flipped from the wall to the outside, she did a flip in the air and landed lightly on her feet. Then, as soon as her feet touched the ground, she immediately rushed out. As soon as she left, a figure immediately flew over. The violent aura directly passed by Lin Xiao and landed in front of her. Lin Xiao's expression did not change. She suddenly turned to the side to avoid Wu Qingyue's figure and continued to rush to the side. When she turned to the side, Wu Qingyue quickly reached out his hand to catch her. His action was actually an instinctive reaction. Instinctively, he wanted to catch the woman in front of him. The woman's body had a very pleasant smell that attracted him. However, not being able to catch her made him feel irritated. He wanted to catch her. He wanted to get her. He thought, what should he do after catching her? Eat her. After all, she smelled very good. However, her smell was not the smell of food. He did not want to eat her. Wu Qingyue's mind could not think about these problems. He only instinctively wanted to catch Lin Xiao. Catch her. Catch the fragrance on her body. However, this woman was too good at running. Like a loach, he could not catch her no matter how he tried. The more he could not catch her, the more he wanted to catch her. His heart was inexplicably occupied by the thought of hunting. Wu Qingyue could only drive his body according to the simple thought. In the isolation zone of a few hundred meters, Lin Xiao was chased by Wu Qingyue. She dodged left and right and finally managed to jump out. She quickly rushed into an alley in the safe zone. Not far enough. Too close. She was still too close to the base. At least she had to leave the safe zone. As Lin Xiao thought about it, she turned around to look at Wu Qingyue, who was behind her. However, when she turned around, she saw that the person was already in front of her. Fuck! Lin Xiao was shocked. Her body instinctively took a step back. Then, she bent her upper body and immediately dodged Wu Qingyue's hand. At the same time, she used both hands to support herself on the ground. She turned around and kicked Wu Qingyue's shoulder. Chapter 892. After kicking Wu Qingyue away, Lin Xiao jumped up and quickly jumped from the top of the building. After being chased by Wu Qingyue for such a long distance, Lin Xiao finally realized that he had no intention of hurting her. Otherwise, a few bolts of lightning would be enough to destroy her. She also knew that Wu Qingyue was still suppressing his own energy. If he really exploded, the scene would only be like before when Mo Yin went berserk with lightning striking down everywhere. Wu Qingyue's expression grew colder and colder when he saw Lin Xiao dodging his attack once again. His gaze was so cold that it became somewhat tyrannical. He suddenly turned around and stared at Lin Xiao's departing figure. The moment Lin Xiao's body left the safe zone, he disappeared in a flash. In the next instant, he appeared in front of Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao was rushing forward when Wu Qingyue's figure suddenly appeared in front of him. At this moment, it was too late for her to stop. She could only subconsciously turn her feet and use her strength to move sideways to avoid Wu Qingyue. But in her heart, she knew it was too late. He could only enter the space. Wu Qingyue quickly hugged the air with both hands. The woman in front of him suddenly disappeared without a trace. He froze for a moment, then immediately turned his head to look around, and found that the woman's aura had also disappeared. Even the fragrance that had captivated him was becoming fainter and fainter, as if it had lost its owner. After discovering that the person he was chasing suddenly disappeared, Wu Qingyue's expression suddenly changed. The energy in his body instantly went berserk. Rumble, bang, bang, bang. Several bolts of lightning descended from the sky and bombarded the area where Wu Qingyue was. Everything within 100 meters was blown to smithereens. On Wu Qingyue's incomparably handsome face, his ice-cold eyes were now filled with a violent intent. The energy around his body spread out chaotically and began to rise higher, causing the clouds and thunder in the sky to resonate. Rumble. The thunder in the sky was getting louder and louder, and the clouds were getting lower and lower. The pressure brought by the thunderclouds was also getting weaker and weaker, making people feel suffocated. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, splashing onto the ground. Dust flew in all directions. Rumble. Wu Qingyue's surroundings were the center of the lightning storm. Lightning energy violently exploded in all directions. Wu Qingyue straightened his back and stood there motionlessly. However, his eyes were no longer cold. Instead, they were filled with madness. At this time, Lin Xiao, who was hiding in the space, did not know that Wu Qingyue had become violent because of her disappearance. Seeing Lin Xiao suddenly running into the space, Lu Tianyi looked at her strangely, because Lin Xiao looked a little embarrassed. "What's wrong? Are you being chased by a dog?" Lu Tianyi ran to Lin Xiao and asked curiously. Lin Xiao subconsciously squinted his eyes to look outside the space, but all he saw was white fog. She opened her eyes, looked at Lu Tianyi, and said, "It's almost done, but this dog is a bit powerful." "All right." Wu Qingyue's current state was more or less that of a mad dog. "What about your dog?" "In any case, it is a level 6 zombie dog, and its fighting strength is not bad. Why don't you call it out and have a dog fight?" Lu Tianyi said with a smile. He thought what Lin Xiao said was true. It might be a mutant dog or some other mutant beast. Lin Xiao glared at him. Wong can't beat him. That was a level 8 metahuman, a lightning type, and also in a berserk state. Wong was only a level 6 zombie beast. If he went out, he would only be abused. But soon, Lin Xiao was not in the mood to care about him because Wu Qingyue was now in a berserk state, who had the ability to knock him out. Even getting close to him was a problem, let alone knocking him out. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao frowned. Although she had lured Wu Qingyue out of the safe zone, she did not know if he would run back to the base. Thinking of bringing the lightning from the sky to the base, Lin Xiao's head began to hurt. But according to the situation of the berserk metahumans, when they went berserk, they did not seem to move casually. Even if they moved, it was because there were targets around them. If there were no targets, they would stay in the same place for a long time. Seeing Lin Xiao frowning, his expression became serious. Lu Tianyi's heart skipped a beat, and he looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. After thinking for a while, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and asked, "It can't be? This mad dog is very powerful? Even you can't deal with it? Do you still need to hide here to avoid it?" Lin Xiao looked up at him and did not say anything. But with this look, Lu Tianyi had already guessed what she meant. Obviously, he was right. He had guessed correctly. He did not know that at this time, Lin Xiao no longer had any energy and her strength had been reduced by half. Looking at him, she was worried that Wu Qingyue would not run back to the base. Lin Xiao could not stay in the space any longer. "I still don't feel at ease with him. I'll go out first." After saying that, she flashed and left the space again. Her vision blurred and she looked around again. Sure enough, it was another unfamiliar scene. She did not know where she had gone. But fortunately, she was still in the city and not in the wilderness. She hurriedly looked for the surrounding road signs and city signs. After a while, she found that she was still in Hangzhou City. But she had run from the upper city where the base was located to the lower city. With a wave of her hand, a car was released. Lin Xiao immediately got into the car and drove back to the base. And on the other side, at the moment when she appeared from the space, Wu Qingyue, who had been standing still, suddenly turned his eyes and stared straight in the direction of the lower city. He seemed to have found something. The violence in his eyes seemed to have weakened a little, and he was a little hesitant. After a while, Wu Qingyue turned around and moved unhurriedly in the direction of the lower city. He seemed to be not sure if the target was there, but his instincts told him that it was there. It seemed that something was leading him there. Lin Xiao did not know that as soon as she came out, she immediately attracted the attention of Wu Qingyue, who was 20 or 30 kilometers away. She did not expect that he would be so far away. Unexpectedly, she could still attract his attention. After Lin Xiao's breath disappeared, the other people in the base looked at each other in confusion, because Wu Qingyue's frenzied breath did not disappear. Elmar said, "Maybe. What if the leader has no other way?" After all, Leader Wu is also a peak level 8 ability user, and he is also a thunder type. Very powerful. In fact, everyone thought so. Yuan Tianxing, who had rushed over after hearing the news, looked in the direction of Wu Qingyue's breath and did not say anything. If even their leader had no other way, then they were even more helpless, because with their strength, they could not get close to Wu Qingyue. If even the leader has no other way, we can only watch from the side, Duan Wan said helplessly. But at this moment, Wu Qingyue suddenly began to move. He was moving in the direction of the lower city. Chapter 893. Hey, he's gone, Xiao Lily said in surprise. Xiao Liqing and the people from High City all looked confused and uneasy. After thinking for a while, he said, "No, we can't let our leader go on like this." Although they couldn't do anything about it, they could still follow and watch. Therefore, he led the people of Sea City and directly jumped down from the wall and had someone drive the car out of the base. They drove the car out of the base and followed Wu Qingyue. Even if they couldn't stop their crazy leader now, they had to watch him. They also had to prevent others from taking advantage of him. With Wu Qingyue's invisible speed, it only took him 10 minutes to travel 20 to 30 kilometers. The closer he got to the downtown area, the faster he went. Because he felt Lin Xiao's aura, he immediately sped up. Not long after Lin Xiao left, she suddenly felt Wu Qingyue's aura coming from afar. No way. Her heart skipped a beat, and she looked in that direction with some surprise and uncertainty. Boom! Then she saw lightning and muffled thunder coming from the sky. Lin Xiao's expression changed. She immediately turned the car around and rushed out. Many of the main roads in the downtown area had been cleared by the people who came to collect supplies. Therefore, Lin Xiao drove without any hindrance. The car rushed out of the city onto the highway and quickly ran in another direction. It didn't matter which direction it was, as long as it wasn't to the base. That man actually caught up with her so quickly. How long had it been? She came out of the space less than 10 minutes ago. Even a dog's nose couldn't be so sensitive. Feeling the familiar energy aura getting closer and closer, Lin Xiao frowned. Did she have to hide in the space again? Although she didn't come out from the same place every time, the distance was not more than 50 kilometers away from the last time. She was already 30 kilometers away from Wu Qingyue now, but he could still sense her direction. It seemed meaningless to go back into the space and come out again, unless she didn't come out. But that couldn't be done because she still had to go back to the base. After thinking about it, she couldn't think of a foolproof way. She couldn't knock Wu Qingyue out in his current state. What should she do? Anyway, in order to prevent Wu Qingyue from approaching her base, she couldn't go back. Meanwhile, in the base, their leader ran out again. The affairs of the base were temporarily taken over by Yuan Tianxing. He was a little speechless. Lin Xiao had just returned not long ago. Why did he run out again? At this moment, one of his subordinates came to report to him. Deputy Leader Zhuo Chun is awake. Yuan Tianxing's eyes turned cold when he heard that. He looked at him and said, "Oh, didn't you say that we don't know when he will wake up? You woke up so soon?" The subordinate continued to whisper. Although he's awake, he still can't move. The doctor said that the toxins in his body had not been completely cleared, and his whole body was in a state of nerve paralysis. I really don't know when this will be over. You can't move? Paralysis? Yuan Tianxing's eyes flashed when he heard that. His whole body was paralyzed, and he couldn't move. Wasn't that the same as an old man having a stroke? In that case, it would be impossible for him to get close to the leader. No one knew when the leader would return. In fact, the reason why they were in the mood to play games with them was because they wanted to collect important evidence so that they could fiercely counterattack. Otherwise, the other people had brought so many people to join their base. If they chased them out for no reason or accused them of crimes without evidence, the other survivors in the base would also be frightened. The other survivors in the base will also be frightened, and it will cause people to feel uneasy, making them think that they are not safe in the base. Since they had built this base, it was definitely to let the survivors live here in peace and not to live in fear and anxiety. If that was the case, the survivors would probably give up on this place soon. Right now, the other party was only halfway through their operation, and they had only collected half of the evidence. It was not enough to kill the other party in one blow. Okay, I got it. Continue to keep an eye on him. Be careful not to be discovered. Yuan Tianqing nodded. The subordinate responded cautiously and left. On the other side, Lu Jun met Hua Antong in the cafeteria almost every day. You seem to be very free recently. Lu Jun looked at him and asked in a strange tone, do you have a purpose for looking for me? For example, to keep asking about the leader? When Hua Antong heard that, he laughed and said, you finally saw through me. Actually, I was afraid that if I said it directly from the beginning, you would reject me. After saying that, he stared into her eyes with a hint of love in them. Lu Jun was stunned, and a strange light flashed in her eyes through the contact lenses. She looked at him in surprise and said, it can't be what I think it is. You. Her reaction made Hua Antong happy. There was no disgust, and no disgust, which meant that he had a good chance. He looked at her happily and nodded. Yes, I like you. But I was afraid that it would be too abrupt to suddenly look for you. So I used those excuses to get close to you. I don't know if you're willing to be with me in the future. Moreover, I will also treat Tong Tong as my own child, unlike his father who treats him like my own child. Lu Jun hesitated and looked at him with a slight frown. The surprise in her eyes hadn't faded yet, and she struggled to say, but you don't have to give me an answer right now, okay? I know you may be very confused right now. So, I'm willing to wait. When you calm down and think it through, you can tell me. Well, Antong quickly interrupted her. Lu Jun really didn't know what to say this time. She looked at him in silence. After a while, she sighed and said, okay, I will think about it seriously. With that, she carried Tong Tong and hurriedly turned around to leave with the umbrella. No one saw that her expression was a little cold under the umbrella, as if she wasn't the one who was surprised and helpless just now. Hua Antong watched her walk away in a daze before turning around and leaving. He couldn't suppress the joy in his heart. After fishing for so long, the fish had finally taken a bait. Mom, I don't like that, Uncle. Tong Tong, who was lying in Lu Jun's arms, suddenly straightened up and looked at Lu Jun. Lu Jun stopped in her tracks and looked at him in surprise. Why doesn't Tong Tong like him? Does he not treat you well? Actually, every time Hua Antong came, he would bring some fun toys for Tong Tong. However, Tong Tong looked scared and didn't dare to accept his gifts every time. Tong Tong looked at her silently. He opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. He just murmured, I just don't like him. With that, he pounced and hugged Lu Jun's neck again without saying a word. Lu Jun smiled at her son and continued walking forward without saying anything. Chapter 894. Zhuochen regretted it after he woke up. He didn't think that he would be poisoned on this trip, and he almost couldn't wake up. He pretended to be injured and stayed in the hospital to get close to that woman. In the end, he really needed to stay in the hospital, but that woman didn't come to the medical department anymore, and he was already paralyzed. How could he get close to her? Thinking about his poisoned body, he didn't know when he would regain consciousness. Zhuochen suddenly felt hatred for Lin Xiao. If it wasn't to get close to that woman, why would he go out on this trip? If he didn't go out and pretend to be injured so that he could stay in the hospital, he wouldn't have been stung by a group of poisonous bees. It was all because of that woman that he ended up like this. Zhuochen didn't think that it was his fault for accidentally touching the poisonous bees, but he pushed all the blame to Lin Xiao. If Lin Xiao knew what he was thinking, he would probably throw him into the beehive. Are you kidding me? It's fine that I'm in the medical department, but that woman isn't in the base now. Then I get poisoned for nothing? Zhuochen lay on the bed, his pale face gloomy. His lips were pale because the poison in his body hadn't been completely removed. He had a handsome face, but his sinister expression and morbid complexion made him look like a ghost. So what if she's in the base? You can't move now. You can't get out of bed or walk. Even if she walks past your door now, you won't be able to touch her." Lu Wan sneered at him. He was obviously unhappy with Zui Chen's attitude. He couldn't help but despise him for not being able to handle such a small matter. It was fine if he pretended to be injured. It was normal to get injured when hunting zombies at the end of the world. But in the end, he was poisoned. And it was a deep poison. Hearing Lu Wan's words, Zui Chen's face became even gloomier. Before the two of them could say anything, the subordinate outside knocked on the door and came in. "It's time for the injection." Zui Chen and Lu Wan both shut their mouths and watched the female nurse walk in with the medicine. Ever since a group of women came, the medical department's care workers had been replaced by female nurses. On the other side, Lin Xiao hadn't been driving on the highway for long when she sensed Wu Qingyue's presence. She immediately jumped out of the car before he arrived and put the car in her space. Boom! Wu Qingyue descended from the sky, and the sound of thunder followed his arrival. Lin Xiao couldn't understand why Wu Qingyue was still so obsessed with her even though he had lost his mind. She couldn't feel his killing intent, so why did he have to capture her? What did he want to do? Perhaps even Wu Qingyue himself did not know the answer to this question. Suddenly, Lin Xiao's mind flashed as he thought of a problem. Since Wu Qingyue didn't want to hurt her now, could she let him catch her and see what he was going to do? Because this might give him a chance to get close to him. Maybe he could directly knock him out by getting close to him. Because of this thought, Lin Xiao hesitated. Then, in the environment where lightning struck down, one hand grabbed her arm, and the other quickly locked on her slender neck. The moment he grabbed Lin Xiao, the energy around Wu Qingyue's body calmed down slightly. The lightning bolts descending on their heads also gradually disappeared. The surrounding grass, trees, and the guardrails of the road were all struck by lightning and fell to the ground. Because of Wu Qingyue's aura, the surrounding mutant beasts and mutant plants all hid and avoided him. None of them dared to approach this area. After discovering that she was being held, Wu Qingyue's aura calmed down a little, and Lin Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. However, the fact that he was grabbing her neck made her very unhappy. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Qingyue's eyes and saw that they were still cold and emotionless. His face was also expressionless. The redness in his eyes shrunk and expanded, and the energy around his body also changed along with the strange redness in his eyes. Lin Xiao stood still, waiting to see what Wu Qingyue was going to do with her. He had already lost his mind, so what would he do? At this moment, Wu Qingyue suddenly lowered his head and stretched his nose over, smelling from the side of Lin Xiao's face to her ears and the side of her neck. Seeing Wu Qingyue's zombie-like actions, Lin Xiao was somewhat at a loss. Was there a smell on her body? She only had the smell of zombies on her body, right? But looking at Wu Qingyue's expressionless face, he seemed to be smelling very enthusiastically. Lin Xiao's face was filled with question marks. However, regardless of the smell on her body, the first thing she had to do was to sneak attack him when he wasn't paying attention. Thus, Lin Xiao quietly raised her left hand that wasn't being grabbed and prepared to move it towards the man's neck. However, just as she raised her hand, Wu Qingyue suddenly lifted his head from her neck. Then he looked at her with a pair of emotionless eyes. Lin Xiao. She suddenly realized that when this man wasn't smiling, his eyes were actually very beautiful. Perhaps it was because the distance between their faces was very long. She could see his long and narrow eyes. His eyes, which were originally as black as ink, now had a circle of red, as if he was wearing contact lenses, giving him a strange sense of beauty. Also, his eyelashes were very thick and long, and the curvature of his eyelashes was also very perfect. Usually, this person always had a smile on his face, or his aura was too strong for people to notice his eyes. Just as Lin Xiao was suddenly attracted by Wu Qingyue's eyes, Wu Qingyue released the hand that was strangling her neck. Then he put his hand on her left hand. With her left hand suddenly being grabbed, Lin Xiao suddenly realized what she was about to do. Her heart skipped a beat, and she thought that Wu Qingyue had discovered what she was about to do. Wu Qingyue stood there and grabbed Lin Xiao's hand. His other hand slid down from her shoulder and grabbed her other hand. Then he didn't do anything and just stood there while holding on to her. Lin Xiao looked left and right and tried to move her hands. Sure enough, although Wu Qingyue didn't look like he was going to hurt her, his grip was very tight. Seeing that the other party obviously didn't do anything else, Lin Xiao felt helpless. Could it be that she was going to stand here with this man and do nothing? Also, why was this person chasing after her so persistently? She looked up at the sky. The rain was still pouring, and she and Wu Chengyue were already drenched. Although she wouldn't fall sick, she didn't know if this man would. It didn't seem like he would either. The other party's energy was in a mess right now, but he was instinctively protecting his body. The dark clouds in the sky were still very thick, but the thunder and lightning were much quieter. However, the faint sound of thunder still rang out from time to time. After Lin Xiao finished looking at the sky, she lowered her head to look at Wu Changyue. Then, she suddenly thought of something and looked at the sky again before lowering her head to look at Wu Changyue. It seemed like the thunderclouds in the sky were showing this man's emotions. When he was chasing her just now, he was clearly very violent. Now that he had caught her, he had calmed down. Chapter 895. Looking at her shackled hands, Lin Xiao was confused. She had to think of a way to free her hands. Otherwise, how could she sneak an attack on this guy? And how long was he going to stand here for? Lin Xiao looked at her wet clothes, which were stuck to her body, and felt uncomfortable. She glanced at Wu Changyue and then looked left and right. This guy was crazy, but after catching her, he just stood there and did nothing. Lin Xiao took a step back and slightly distanced herself from him. However, as soon as she moved, Wu Changyue followed her. This reaction was a little interesting. Seeing that she had stepped back, Wu Changyue didn't pull her back and just followed her. Lin Xiao was stunned and then tentatively took 2 steps to the side. Sure enough, Wu Changyue only followed her for 2 steps and didn't react anymore. At this moment, Lin Xiao thought that he wouldn't react anymore. Wu Changyue suddenly lowered his head and stuck his nose over, sniffing at her neck under her ear. Lin Xiao thought, so after losing her mind, your instincts become dogs? However, Lin Xiao realized that the more Wu Changyue sniffed, the calmer the energy on his body became. The energy storm that had spread more than 10 meters away gradually shrank to within 2 meters of the two of them. After the rain hit Wu Changyue and drenched him, the energy didn't help him block the rain. Lin Xiao moved her head slightly, wanting to keep Wu Qingyue's face away from her. However, the more she moved, the lower his face became. His hot breath hit her neck, although Lin Xiao didn't feel anything on her skin. However, she felt weird, especially since he was still in this position. Although she was very aware of his approach, Wu Changyue was no longer conscious. He didn't do anything with any hidden motives and only acted on instinct. This made Lin Xiao accept it more, and she didn't feel so conflicted. Since he didn't intend to do anything, she could only find a place to hide from the rain. Lin Xiao slowly stepped back, wondering if she could slowly take this person away from here. She couldn't agitate him, lest he went crazy again. However, when Lin Xiao moved, Wu Qingyue immediately raised his head. He looked at Lin Xiao coldly, his eyes still emotionless. It made people think that he was angry, but they weren't sure. Lin Xiao stopped in his tracks to see if he would get angry. However, Wu Qingyue just raised his head and stared at her, then straightened up. He even let go of one of his hands, leaving only his left hand holding onto Lin Xiao's right hand. Lin Xiao looked at his hand in surprise, and then looked at his other hand that had been released. This reaction was different from what she had expected. She raised her head and looked at Wu Qingyue's eyes carefully. She found that the redness in his eyes had faded a lot, but the expression in his eyes was still the same. Lin Xiao moved his leg and shifted his position. Then, he looked at Wu Qingyue's reaction. Sure enough, he only tightened his grip on Lin Xiao's hand and remained silent. She simply pulled him to the side and saw that Wu Changyue was just following her with a straight face. After thinking for a while, Lin Xiao brought Wu Changyue into the space. He didn't know if he could use the power of the space, to suppress Wu Changyue. If it didn't work, then he could only bring him out. Lin Xiao brought Wu Qingyue and directly appeared in the space forest. The surrounding atmosphere immediately became oppressive. As if feeling threatened, the aura around Wu Qingyue immediately soared. It immediately formed a wave of air that shook the forest. Whoosh, dash, rumble. A burst of thunder immediately sounded in Lin Xiao's space. The zombies outside the forest were suddenly suppressed by the powerful aura and the pressure of the thunder and lightning energy. They all looked at the forest in fear. Lu Tianyi frowned. He was also suppressed to the point that he couldn't move. But he was somewhat familiar with this aura. Wasn't this Wu Qingyue's aura? It was fine that Lu Tianyi brought him in, but what was with this wave of air? Moreover, Wu Qingyue's aura was very violent, completely different from before. And Mo Yin, who was in the room upstairs, was also frowning. Although his corpse core was damaged, his aura was not weaker than Wu Qingyue's, so Wu Qingyue's energy wave and aura did not affect him much. It was just that the chaotic feeling in Wu Qingyue's aura proved that Wu Changyue was not normal at this time. This feeling was similar to when he had gone berserk. As someone who was also of the lightning element, no one understood better than him the chaos and uneasiness in the thunder at this moment. He didn't know why that female zombie brought Wu Changyue in this state. Wasn't she afraid that he would accidentally blow up this space? Or could it be that this female zombie space was so powerful that it could suppress a level 8 thunder-type psychic? Lin Xiao didn't know whether she could suppress a level 8 thunder-type psychic, but she did suppress a level 8 psychic before. Seeing Wu Changyue suddenly erupt, Lin Xiao quickly took a step back, raised her free hand and pressed down in Wu Qingyue's direction. The suppressive force of the space was immediately concentrated here, and it pressed down on Wu Qingyue from all directions. Being suppressed by the power of the space, Wu Qingyue's face immediately became ferocious. He opened his eyes and frowned. His lips that were originally tightly pursed also cracked, and he clenched his teeth to suppress the suppression. Even so, he didn't let go of Lin Xiao's hand. Instead, the strength of the grip became stronger and stronger, almost breaking the bones in Lin Xiao's hand. Lin Xiao didn't feel any pain from the tightening grip, and at the same time, she gritted her teeth and increased the suppression of the space. Because of Wu Qingyue's suppression, Lin Xiao was also struggling. She felt that she was getting out of control. However, at this time, Wu Qingyue didn't know that the threat he was feeling was coming from Lin Xiao's actions. After Wu Changyue held on for a while, he seemed to feel that the power that wanted to suppress him had loosened a little. He fiercely pulled Lin Xiao over and hugged him tightly in his arms. In a protective manner, he resisted and protected her at the same time. Lin Xiao was confused by his action. She didn't expect Wu Changyue to still want to protect her at this time. While she was stunned, the power in her hand immediately loosened. Wu Qingyue also took this opportunity to break free from the suppression, and at the same time, his own energy surged and spread to the surroundings. He held Lin Xiao and looked around vigilantly. Originally, when Lin Xiao used the power of the space to suppress Wu Qingyue's energy suppression, the other zombies in the space felt a little better. But in just a few seconds, they felt that Wu Qingyue's energy suppression suddenly increased. Lu Tianyi, who wanted to run far away from here, ran 2 steps and immediately became stiff and couldn't move his legs. He couldn't help but want to roar at the 2 people in the forest. If you want to play, can't you go outside to play? They're scared to death, okay? Chapter 896. Lin Xiao let out a sigh of relief and helplessly found that this trick really didn't work. After the energy core couldn't be used, her control over the power of space also became smaller. She couldn't suppress Wu Qingyue at all. Because of Wu Qingyue's rampage, Lu Tianyi and the other zombies on this side of the lake were stiff and didn't dare to move, while the mutant sheep and roe deer on the other side of the lake were all on the ground with their heads buried. Speaking of this group of roe deer and mutant sheep, in addition to the ones they originally caught, there were also some young ones. Rumble Dash, Although there were no black clouds in the sky, Wu Changyue could still strike down a few lightning strikes from the sky to hit the trees. Bang, 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 dash. The lightning struck the tree trunks in Lin Xiao's space, creating a burst of sparks. But these trees couldn't be damaged in the slightest. The degree of hardness could be imagined. Looking at Wu Qingyue's violent energy, Lin Xiao could only take him out of the space. Since her space couldn't suppress him, there was no need to stay inside. After coming out, Wu Qingyue was still holding Lin Xiao tightly, one hand holding her hand, the other hand around her waist. After a while, when he felt that there were no threats around, he slightly raised his head to look around. His nose was filled with the fragrance he liked, so he didn't continue to go crazy. Lin Xiao stood motionless. Her clothes were still wet, but being held like this, she could feel the other's body temperature. Fortunately, it wasn't very hot, and it was raining. Her body was wet and cold, so Lin Xiao didn't feel uncomfortable. Since she couldn't enter the space and couldn't go back to the base, she could only find a house to hide from the rain. But this was the suburbs, a few kilometers away from the city area. With Wu Qingyue's current situation, she couldn't bring other people out to be drivers for her. She didn't know if Wu Qingyue cared, but even if he didn't care, the zombies in her space weren't high level. If they came out, they would probably be scared by Wu Qingyue's energy pressure and wouldn't dare to move. Then she could only go back. But now she had to wait for this madman to calm down first. Rumble dash, a few more lightnings struck less than 5 meters around the two of them, and grass flew everywhere. With his body restrained, Lin Xiao could only silently look up at the sky. Numerous lightning snakes flashed in the clouds, and from time to time, a few would fall. As he watched, he suddenly realized that there were fewer and fewer lightning bolts falling down. Then, the lightning snakes in the dark clouds gradually faded away. Lin Xiao immediately reacted. The lightning energy around him had indeed calmed down, and it was slowly shrinking back. At this moment, a few sounds suddenly came from afar. Oh, oh, oh. As soon as he heard this strange cry, he knew it was Ah Wang. Since Ah Wang had appeared, it meant that the other two weren't far away. She didn't expect that the three she had left at the outskirts of the base would chase after her. Here comes the real dog nose. Wu Changyue, who had been gradually calming down, suddenly became alert again when he heard Ah Wang's voice, as though he had sensed that his territory had been invaded. He jerked his head up and stared warily in the direction of Ah Wang's voice. The surrounding air pressure began to rise again. Rumble. The lightning serpents that had just quietly disappeared began to flash out from the dark clouds again. Lin Xiao was speechless as he looked at his instinctive reaction. Perhaps because Wu Qingyue's energy aura was too strong, Ah Wang and the other two didn't dare to come close. They could only appear on a hill beside the highway and howl in Lin Xiao's direction from afar. Whoa. It's not that we don't want to go over, but we can't. Master, what are you guys playing at? Is it fun? Lin Xiao. It's not fun at all. Wu Changyue, who had finally calmed down a little, began to rage again. Lin Xiao felt helpless. At this moment, Wu Changyue suddenly looked around. The highway was too empty, and he didn't feel safe. He had to leave this place and find a safe place. Instinctively, he acted according to the thoughts in his heart. Before Lin Xiao could react, he suddenly flipped her over and carried her up. Her body froze, and before she could react, she suddenly heard the sound of the wind and the feeling of rain on the side of her face. She turned to look and saw that Wu Changyue had already leaped into the sky with her. He stepped on the street lights and leaped in the direction of the city. Lin Xiao immediately reached out a hand to the back of Wu Qingyue's neck while being carried by him. She was prepared to take advantage of the fact that he was not paying attention while they were rushing. However, just as her hand reached behind him, Wu Qingyue suddenly stopped. He stood on a street light and looked down at her. His face was expressionless, and his eyes were cold. Lin Xiao. She didn't know why she felt a little guilty when he looked at her. What was going on? Why did she feel guilty? She silently retracted her hand. The two of them looked at each other for a few seconds before Wu Qingyue looked away. His legs moved, and he continued to move forward. After a while, Houses immediately appeared in the surrounding environment. Wu Chengyue still carried Lin Xiao and leaped onto the roofs of one building after another. He leaped toward the tallest building nearby. Lin Xiao could even feel the 3 dogs following them from afar, but they were really far away. She seemed to have smelled the scent of Xiao Liqing and the others from afar, but it was washed clean by the rain. If it wasn't for her nose being more sensitive than a dog's, she probably wouldn't have been able to smell the faint scent. However, Lin Xiao quickly understood that Xiao Liqing and the others were probably here to keep an eye on Wu Chengyue. Even if Wu Chengyue went crazy now, they couldn't just ignore him. After all, he was their leader. Apart from Xiao Liqing, Lin Xiao also smelled Duan Wan and the others in her base. Obviously, they had come together. At this moment, Xiao Liqing was indeed a few kilometers away from Wu Chengyue and Lin Xiao. Did they really go this way? Xiao Liqing asked Duan Wan in the back seat uncertainly. Duan Wan looked at Shun Yuzhen next to her. Shun Yuzhen looked out of the window and nodded. It's in this direction. I can feel the leader's aura. I can also feel Leader Wu's energy fluctuations. Can you guys feel it? Xiao Liqing thought for a few seconds. Maybe they're too far away. Can you feel how far they are? Shun Yuzhen shook her head. Xiao Liqing looked at Duan Wan again. Does your leader really have a way? What if she can't do it? After all, their leader was too powerful, although Lu Tianyu was also very strong now. Lu Tianyu was also very strong now, but in Xiao Liqing's eyes, there was still a gap between him and Wu Chengyue. Duan Wan shrugged. If even our leader can't do anything, then we can only wait for your leader to wake up. Anyway, even their leader couldn't do it, let alone the others. Even if they called Sikong Chan over, the effect would probably be worse than their leaders. Chapter 897. When Lin Xiao was placed on the ground, Wu Chengyue had already taken her to a room on the top floor of a tall building. After arriving here, Wu Chengyue did not do anything, but he still held her hand. It seemed that as long as Lin Xiao was by his side, he would always be this quiet. Actually, it was her scent that calmed him down, but Lin Xiao did not know this. News of Wu Chengyue going berserk quickly spread back to Sea City Base. But under the orders of Xiao Yunlong and Zhou Shihui, this news was immediately covered up. How could it be now? What should we do now? Who has the ability to wake him up? Xiao Yunlong frowned with a headache and said in a somewhat impatient tone. They clearly knew that China and the other bases were preparing to come over to discuss a deal, but at this time, their strongest expert went crazy. Without Wu Chengyue's deterrence, the other party would obviously make other moves. That was why he couldn't let the other party know about this. Zhou Shihui was also frowning, but he was much calmer than Xiao Yunlong. He thought for a moment before saying, "Doesn't Miss Liu from the Universal Base know how to turn invisible? Moreover, her strength shouldn't be any weaker than ours. If she can't even use invisibility, what else can we do? I don't think we can even get close to Wu Chengyue." Those who were strong and could get close to him. Thinking about it, there was no one more suitable than that woman. Then what should we do? We can only rely on her. If she also can't do it, then are we just going to watch him go crazy? Xiao Yunlong said irritably. Looking at his tone, it was obvious that he felt that the female zombie wouldn't be able to succeed so easily. After all, in his eyes, Wu Chengyue was very strong. Very strong. Zhou Shihui looked at him and said angrily, "Don't be so pessimistic. Maybe Miss Liu can really succeed? Besides, the most important thing now is to keep an eye on this news and not let leak out. We must keep an eye on this." Xiao Yunlong's expression also grew solemn. The people of Sea City and Universal Life Base placed their hopes on Lin Xiao to wake Wu Chengyue up. However, they did not know that Wu Chengyue was looking for various opportunities to sneak attack Lin Xiao. As a result, every time she was about to make a move, Wu Chengyue would turn his head and stare at her. Lin Xiao had no choice but to silently withdraw his hand. After a few times, she finally understood. Wu Chengyue's senses were very sharp. As long as she had a thought, he would immediately discover it. But he didn't do anything to her every time. He just quietly looked at her with a pair of cold and expressionless beautiful eyes. Therefore, every time Lin Xiao saw his pair of red eyes looking at him, Lin Xiao felt an inexplicable sense of guilt in his heart. It was as if he had done something bad. Duan Wan, Xiao Liqing, and the others hid a few hundred meters away from the building where Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue were. They carried items that were stained with Lin Xiao's blood, so the surrounding zombies avoided them. They just needed to pay attention to the other mutants. The leader's energy seems to have calmed down again, but it doesn't seem like he's awake. What's going on with him now? Xiao Liqing carefully sensed the auras of the two people on the rooftop in the distance, but he could only sense the calm aura of his leader. His leader's aura had disappeared for a while, but it didn't take long for him to reappear. However, when he reappeared, his aura was very turbulent. After it appeared, it quickly moved towards the city. When they caught up, they found that their leader's aura had calmed down again. Was he awake now, or was he not awake? No matter what, even if their leader went crazy, he was different from others. Duan Wan and Shun Yuzhen both looked at Xiao Liqing with a blank face and shook their heads. When other espers go berserk, their energy will go everywhere, and their abilities will be released randomly. But Wu Qingyue only occasionally dropped a few lightning bolts, and then it kept rumbling in the dark clouds in the sky. What kind of madness was this? Or was he doing something? What happened to the strongest person? Although the energy looked very violent, why didn't it feel so scary? But thinking about it was just thinking about it. The few of them didn't dare to get too close to experience their leader going crazy. The leader is also with Leader Wu. Could it be because of our leader? Shun Yuzhen sniffed in the direction of Lin Xiao and Xiao Liqing, then turned around and said to the two of them. Duan Wan and Xiao Liqing both looked at her. They were only mutants, so their perception wasn't as detailed as Shun Yuzhen's. Hearing her say this, the two of them felt that it was possible, but it had been so long, and Miss Lu still hadn't brought Wu Qingyue back soberly. It seemed that the situation on her side was a bit tricky. On one hand, they wanted to figure out the situation of the two of them, but on the other hand, they didn't dare to rashly approach. Duan Wan and the others were so curious that they felt like they were being scratched by a cat, but they had to suppress their curiosity. At this moment, Shun Yuzhen suddenly turned her head and sniffed in another direction. Her expression darkened, and she looked at Duan Wan and said, "Your pursuers are here." Hearing this, Duan Wan immediately knew who she was referring to. Her expression also darkened, and a sharp light flashed in her eyes. Xiao Liqing looked at the two of them strangely. "Who are they?" Duan Wan glanced at him and sneered. "A few rats, but since they are here, we can't let them escape." Then she turned to look at Shun Yuzhen and said, "Since they dare to follow us here, then let's make sure they don't return. Anyway, if they die outside, it has nothing to do with our base." Shun Yuzhen looked at her. "They have a lot of people, and we don't have enough people here. It will be difficult to kill them all." It was just difficult, but not impossible. Duan Wan smiled, but there was a trace of coldness in her smile. "Didn't you feel it? Look over there." With that, she pointed in another direction. Shun Yuzhen and Xiao Liqing looked in the direction that Duan Wan pointed, but they didn't see anything. However, after sensing carefully, they found that there were a few subtle auras that were somewhat familiar. "This is Meh, Ao Wang, and the other two?" Shun Yuzhen immediately found out the identity of the other party. With a smile in her eyes, Duan Wan nodded. Their leader's three pets were no longer a secret in the eyes of everyone present. Shun Yuzhen said hesitantly, "But they only listened to the leader. Can they cooperate with us?" Xiao Liqing didn't have any objections to their conversation. They wanted to kill the group of unknown people who had secretly followed them here. Of course, he wanted to do so too, because too many people couldn't know that their leader had gone crazy. Although Yuan Tianxing and Lin Feng had suppressed the people in the base, it was uncertain about the situation outside. Seeing Duan Wan and Shun Yuzhen's attitude, Xiao Liqing knew that he was on their side. Chapter 898. We don't need them to be obedient and cooperate with us. We just need to cooperate with them. Look at this. Duan Wan smiled as she took out the item stained with Lin Xiao's blood aura and shook it. Lure them over. Shen Yuzhen's eyes lit up. You mean, she understood. She meant to lure them over and invade the territory of the three pets. They had Lin Xiao's aura, so they would be fine. But those who followed them might not have Lin Xiao's aura. We just need to be careful not to let anyone escape. Duan Wan smiled meaningfully and stood up. Let's go. As she spoke, she glanced at Xiao Liqing. Xiao Liqing nodded. They quickly moved and left with their subordinates. Lu Wan, along with 2 rank 5 ability users and a dozen rank 2 and 3 ability users, followed Duan Wan's group from a distance. Using his binoculars, he watched as Duan Wan's group suddenly left and drove off in the direction of the thunderclouds. He had just come out of the medical center when he heard someone say that the leader of Ocean City had gone crazy. The female leader of Universal Base wanted to stop him. Since the 2 leaders had left the base, their subordinates would definitely follow. When he heard that Duan Wan had also left the base, and that there were only 3 people with her, none of whom were very strong. Even if there was a level 6 Arcanist, he could deal with that one. Duan Wan and Shen Yuzhen were level 5 and level 4 respectively, so the others could deal with them. Lu Wan obviously didn't care about the other level 2 driver. Lu Wan immediately led his men out of the base. Since Shen Yuzhen and Duan Wan were together, they could capture them together. Since it happened outside the base, as long as they kept it a secret, Chen Yuding wouldn't find out. Chase them. Don't let them escape. We must catch them this time. Don't worry about the other 2. Just keep them busy, Lu Wan immediately ordered. Then a group of people quickly left and jumped into the car to chase after them. On the other side, Duan Wan and the others drove to a place not far from where Ao Wang's 3 pets were. They immediately got out of the car and hid in the house to ambush them. They were waiting for Lu Wan and the others to come. Ao Wang and the others sensed the arrival of Duan Wan and the others. Because they smelled Lin Xiao's aura on them, Ao Wang and the others did not care much and directly ignored them. But not long after, another group of unfamiliar auras appeared. This group of humans did not have Lin Xiao's aura, which immediately made Ao Wang and Dahe vigilant. Ao Wang stood up from the corner of a building's roof. He pricked up his ears and raised his head to take a sniff. After confirming that this group of people did not have Lin Xiao's aura, it began to squint its eyes and bare its teeth. Roar! A low roar came from Ao Wang's throat. Hearing its voice, the mushroom spirit hiding in the stairwell and Dahe, who was coiled on the stairwell roof, immediately poked its head out. In fact, Dahe was so big that it covered the entire roof of the stairwell. Big and eye-catching, the aura of a level 6 mutant beast and a level 6 zombie beast were enough to deter other intruders. Their auras had already temporarily marked out the territory in this area. However, at this time, 2 groups of people came. One group had the aura of their master, and the other didn't. Therefore, based on their animal instincts, they immediately rejected the group of people that did not have Lin Xiao's aura. Dahe slid down from the roof and landed on the platform. Then, it stretched its head out and leaned against the railing at the edge of the roof. Its snake eyes revealed a hint of laziness as it looked in the direction of Ao Wang's warning. The mushroom spirit was relatively timid, so it was only willing to hide in the stairwell and poke its head out. Ao Wang's voice was very low, so other than the 2 beside it, no one else could hear it. However, Duan Wan and the others could clearly feel that Ao Wang's aura had become vigilant, and it carried a sense of danger. Wait a minute, Brother Wan. Why do I feel that there is something dangerous around those people? One of the 2 level 5 paranormals sitting behind Lu Wan suddenly said with a frown. As human paranormals, their perception was not as strong as that of beasts. However, the one who spoke was a psychic paranormal, so his perception was stronger than that of ordinary paranormals. What did you feel? Lu Wan, who was sitting in the passenger seat, turned to look at him and asked. If it had been someone else who said this, he would not have taken it to heart. However, since this psychic paranormal had said it, he had no choice but to be vigilant. The psychic paranormal frowned and carefully tried to sense again, but this time he could not feel anything. He said with some uncertainty, "For a moment, I felt that something dangerous was staring at us, but now I don't feel anything." The other level 5 paranormal looked at him and said, "Could it be that you were thinking too much just now?" As for Ah Wong, he had already retracted his aura and began to hide. Even Dahei's aura was concealed. The two of them had tacitly entered hunter mode. Although the aura of their bodies had disappeared, their eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. It was the state of a predator in the forest when it was about to hunt. Ah Wong's figure flickered as he leaped down from the roof of the 10-story building. He hid himself in another direction, circled around Duan Wan and the others, and leaped toward the back of Lu Wan's group. Dahei stayed in place and sensed Ah Wong's aura. After moving, it had clearly sensed Ah Wong's thoughts. It immediately dove in front of Duan Wan and the others and observed them in the dark. Only Mushroom Spirit was left on the top of the building. Seeing that its two companions had gone down, it immediately jumped out and looked left and right. After sensing the hunting aura of its two companions, it also wanted to go hunting. Seeing that Ah Wong and Dahei were rushing toward the group of people behind them, Mushroom Spirit naturally wanted to go after them. This was because the people in front had the aura of its master. So Mushroom Spirit flew down from the building like the wind and chased after Ah Wong at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Although Duan Wan and the others could not sense the aura of the three pets, Shun Yuzhen could use her nose to smell any changes in the position of the zombie dogs. "They are attacking." Shun Yuzhen's eyes flashed with joy. Although Duan Wan's words sounded very reliable, when they actually took action, they realized that the three pets were just as they thought they were. They immediately felt as if they had won the lottery. "Let's go. We can't let those rats escape." Duan Wan's eyes turned cold, and she immediately retracted her aura and flashed out. Xiao Liqing and Shun Yuzhen also flashed out, leaving only the level 2 driver behind. Chapter 899. On the roof, Lin Xiao stood in the room with Wu Changyue holding her hand. She did nothing but stand there. This building was an office building, but the room Wu Changyue found was a lounge next to the office of a senior manager of a company before Doomsday. One side of the wall of the lounge was made of glass. People outside couldn't see inside, but people inside could see outside. There was a glass window next to it. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Changyue, who had calmed down and didn't respond like a robot. She slowly walked to the window. Wu Changyue followed her. Wu Changyue didn't restrict her freedom in the room. He just held her hand and didn't let go. Like Siamese twins, he followed Lin Xiao wherever she went. Lin Xiao looked at her hand that he didn't let go and sighed. She couldn't beat him from the front and had no chance to attack him from behind. She had to find another way to subdue him. She remembered that Lin Hao had said that her lake water could also work. Since she couldn't knock him out, she would let him drink a cup of lake water. Walking to the window, Lin Xiao immediately smelled the breath of two groups of people in the air outside. One was Duan Wan, Xiao Liqing, and the other was the people in the base who were courting death. Lin Xiao felt that Ah Wong and the other two were quietly surrounding the group of people who were courting death. She was stunned for a moment and then felt relieved. Well, since these people dared to chase after them, they must be coming for Duan Wan and Shun Yuzhen. But since they were here, they wouldn't go back. If they were just making trouble in the base, she would deal with them slowly. She didn't expect that they would run out of the base to court death. Then she would help them. Lin Xiao suddenly roared loudly at the window. Roar 500 or 600 meters away from Lin Xiao. Ah Wong and Dahei, who were quietly surrounding Lu Wan and the others, suddenly stopped and their eyes changed. An ice-cold, killing intent flashed through the aura of the three beasts before disappearing without a trace. Lin Xiao's order was to kill all of them. Shun Yuzhen, who was beside Duan Wan, also heard Lin Xiao's voice. Her eyes lit up and she whispered to Duan Wan. The leader found them and ordered Ah Wong and the others to kill them. It seems that they can't escape this time. Duan Wan nodded. He continued to sneak toward Lu Wan and the others. Lu Wan, who didn't know that Ah Wang had already circled to the back, heard the roar, and his expression changed. The one with the most unsightly expression was the spiritual type ability user. The blood drained from his face as a look of horror appeared in his eyes. It's complete. There was a zombie king nearby. That was an order from the zombie king. Lu Wan's expression also changed, and he immediately turned to look out the window. Sure enough, the zombies outside began to gather at their location. Roar, roar, there weren't many zombies in the surroundings, and Lu Wan's group had killed a lot of them. But the smell of living people on their bodies still attracted the surrounding zombies. However, this huge crisis made Lu Wan realize that it wasn't just the zombies nearby that had gathered here. Even those who were far away would gather here. Bang, 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 dash, in the car behind Lu Wan's car, several guns extended out of the window and shot at the zombies around them. A zombie's head hung crookedly on its neck. Its facial features were distorted. Its eyes were black, and it was baring its teeth. It tilted its head, swung its legs, and stretched out its arms as it ran over. Bang, dash, a bullet hit its body, but it only stopped its advance for half a second, and it continued to rush forward. Roar, dash, bang, dash. If the bullet didn't hit its head, zombies wouldn't die. So when the shooter saw they didn't hit its head, he immediately shot at its crooked head. At this time, the zombie's head suddenly swung to the side, tilting to the other side. It moved so fast that it dodged the second bullet. Moreover, its running speed was very fast. This was a zombie that had evolved to level 1. This zombie had been staring at this group of people before, but because Lin Xiao, Ah Wang, and the other high-level zombies were suppressing it, it didn't dare to appear. Now, the zombie king had given the order. It could rush out unscrupulously to hunt for food. After dodging the 2 shots, the crooked-head zombie suddenly arched its body and jumped up with both of its legs. It pounced on the second car that Lu Wan and the others were in. Seeing that the zombie was about to pounce on them, their bullets were useless. One of the 4 humanoids on the roof of the car waved his hand, and a small pile of icicles flew toward the zombie. Puff, puff, dash, the hard icicles hit the zombie's body, and one of them happened to hit its eye and penetrated the back of its head. Patong! The zombie fell from the sky. From the moment the zombie appeared to the moment it was killed, only a few seconds had passed. Everyone in the car was on high alert, and they couldn't wait to look in all directions. They were afraid that a zombie would suddenly appear and bite them to death if they were careless. But this time, Lu Wan had brought elites with him. They had rich combat experience, and they were all psychics. They also brought a lot of weapons, and they were very experienced in dealing with zombies. Their main purpose this time was to catch someone, but they didn't expect to be surrounded by zombies before they could even get close. Generally, when they encountered a large number of zombies, they would quickly find a high point to kill some of the zombies, or find a well-protected room to hide. But at this time, the zombies around them seemed to have gone crazy, and there were more and more. There was a large group of zombies chasing behind them, and there were also a bunch of zombies jumping out from the front and the side. And the movement here would definitely attract the attention of Duan Wan and the others. Tell them not to shoot. Use your ability. Hurry up and rush to where Duan Wan and the others are, and lead the zombies there. Lu Wan looked back, and his face was a bit ugly. The level 5 psychic behind him held a walkie-talkie and said to the car a few meters behind them, "Don't shoot. Use your ability to fight." Behind him, the sound of gunfire had already stopped. Only the sound of abilities exploding and the roars of zombies could be heard. At this time, he looked straight ahead, and from time to time, he would raise a wall to block the zombies on both sides. Suddenly, something flashed before his eyes. Bang! Lu Wan felt something hit the roof of the car. A woo! A strange yet ear-piercing roar of a beast rang out. Lu Wan and the others felt a chill run down their spines, as if they had fallen into an icy cavern. At the same time, they realized that this was the cry of a zombie beast. On the other hand, there was no one on the roof of Lu Wan's car. The people on the roof of the car behind turned their heads and saw a huge mutant beast standing on top of their boss's car. However, The mutant beast noticed the zombie-like roar. Chapter 900. Everyone in the car behind was stunned when they saw the huge wolfhound, which was unknown whether it was a mutated beast or a zombie, land on the car in front of them. However, in the outside world, a moment of relaxation was fatal. Just as they were in a daze, a figure suddenly appeared beside them and pounced on the people on the roof of the car at lightning speed. It was too late for them to react. In the blink of an eye, a level 3 zombie had already rushed in front of them. Ah, bang! The person who was pounced on screamed and fell on the roof of the car. The other 3 instinctively jumped down from the roof of the car. In the end, they were greeted by a group of zombies rushing towards them. Ho! Roar! At this time, Along had already lowered his body and was looking at the windshield of Lu Wan and the others. It even raised one of its front paws and slammed it on the glass. Bang! Gee! The entire windshield in front of him was smashed. The driver slammed on the brakes, and the car tilted, almost crashing into the electric pole next to it. While Lu Wan's situation was extremely dangerous, Duan Wan and the others found a high vantage point to watch the show through binoculars. On the other side, Lin Xiao shouted an order and took out a glass of water from the space. She held the glass and looked up at Wu Qingyue's face. After thinking for a while, she slowly raised the glass to his handsome lips and gently touched his lips. However, Wu Qingyue only slightly shifted his indifferent gaze and stared at the water in the cup beside his lips. Maybe it was because the cup was a little close to his face, but his eyes were almost crossed. In the end, Wu Qingyue only glanced at it and moved his face back, avoiding the cup. Seeing his reaction, Lin Xiao's face fell. All right, he wasn't interested in the lake's energy. What should he do now? Force it down? Lin Xiao thought about it and tried to extend the cup over again. However, she saw Wu Qingyue's face turn to the side and he avoided it again. Here comes the problem again. She was holding the cup in one hand, and her other hand was held tightly. How was she supposed to convince this man? After trying a few times, Wu Qingyue's aura suddenly fluctuated and rose sharply. He abruptly raised his other free hand and slapped away the cup that Lin Xiao extended in front of him. Yes, Lin Xiao reacted quickly and dodged the hand that was coming at him in time. When Wu Qingyue saw that he did not knock the cup out of Lin Xiao's hand, the energy in his body began to rise again. His eyes were fixed on the cup in her hand. Xiao Lin, she silently turned her face aside, sighed, and drank the water into her mouth. Then, he put away the cup. Wu Qingyue looked at the way she raised her head to drink the water and then stared at her moving throat. The aura around him suddenly dropped. After Lin Xiao finished drinking the water, he stared straight at Lin Xiao's moist lips. His eyes suddenly flashed, and the color of his eyes darkened. Lin Xiao suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of danger from Wu Qingyue. She quickly turned her head and looked at him vigilantly. She then realized that Wu Qingyue was staring at her lips without blinking. Lin Xiao's scalp went numb and his eyes darkened. Sigh, could it be that he wanted to kiss her? As soon as this thought appeared, Wu Qingyue's face suddenly pressed down on her. Lin Xiao quickly moved her neck back and immediately turned her face away to avoid Wu Qingyue's lips. Her other hand quickly lifted up to hold Wu Qingyue's chin, and her own chin was instantly pinched. Shit, he had already lost his mind, and he still wanted to take advantage of her. Lin Xiao wanted to throw Wu Qingyue on the plains to be trampled by a group of mutant beasts. Although she reacted quickly and turned her face away, she used her hand to hold Wu Qingyue's face. But her strength at this time was somewhat unable to compete with Wu Qingyue's strength. Lin Xiao felt her chin being pulled back by a strong force, and her hand that was holding Wu Qingyue's face was slowly pressed down. Lin Xiao, who had cursed 100 times in her heart, was speechless. She was now a level 7 zombie. Her strength could be said to be several times stronger than her. Okay, but why was Wu Qingyue's strength stronger than hers? Was he still human? But then she thought about how other psychics could blow a few holes in the iron wall of the isolation room when they went crazy. Thinking about it, When they went crazy, their strength would also be abnormal. With the tip of her chin being pulled away, Lin Xiao could only retreat. However, her back was quickly pressed against the wall around the small window, and she had nowhere to retreat. At this time, Wu Qingyue's lips also pressed down. This was not just a gentle touch, because Wu Qingyue directly opened his mouth and bit Lin Xiao's moist lips. Lin Xiao, who was bitten. Shit, she was a zombie, okay? Why did she feel a tingling sensation coming from her lips? In fact, the pain from her lips was not very serious, but after this kind of tingling sensation, there was a strange, numbing sensation spreading on her lips. But at this moment, Lin Xiao suddenly had a flash of inspiration. That's right. Since he wouldn't drink from a cup, then she would feed him with her mouth. As long as he drank the lake water, there was no need to worry about anything else. Anyway, she had done more intimate things with him. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao suddenly turned her face away. The hand that was originally pressing against Wu Qingyue's neck loosened, and a cup of water immediately appeared in her hand. She quickly poured it into her mouth. Then, she quickly turned her head back and took the initiative to kiss Wu Qingyue's lips. The sweet and soft taste in his mouth suddenly disappeared. Wu Qingyue was stunned, and a wave of madness immediately appeared in his heart. However, before he could do anything, Lin Xiao kissed him again. Her soft and fragrant tongue came over and quickly pushed Wu Qingyue's teeth open. Then, she passed all the lake water in her mouth over. Wu Qingyue, who was originally sucking the liquid from Lin Xiao's mouth, swallowed the water that Lin Xiao passed over. Then, his tongue also entered Lin Xiao's mouth as if he was catching prey, tangling with her soft tongue for a while. The hand that was holding on her chin slowly loosened, and he instinctively hugged Lin Xiao's body tightly in his arms. The hand that had been holding onto Lin Xiao without letting go also loosened at this time. Both of his hands were tightly wrapped around Lin Xiao's waist, and he strangled her to his body. After Lin Xiao finished the water, she wanted to step back and drink another mouthful. However, this person refused to let her step back. He tyrannically wrapped his tongue around hers and vigorously sucked on her lips. Because she didn't need to breathe, Lin Xiao didn't feel dizzy or weak all over. It was just that the feeling on her lips was still very sensitive, and the numbing sensation spread from her lips to the sensory organs in her mouth and tongue. However, she had only crossed a mouthful of lake water, and it was far from enough to resolve Wu Qingyue's madness. So, when Lin Xiao thought about how she had to cross a few more mouthfuls, her heart felt stifled. Chapter 901. Struggling to save his tongue, Lin Xiao quickly turned his face away and gulped down a mouthful of water. Then she turned her head and kissed Wu Qingyue again. When Wu Qingyue kissed her, the energy in his body would fade away. Every time she struggled to break away from his kiss, his energy would immediately go berserk until Lin Xiao kissed him again. After going back and forth 5 times, Lin Xiao felt that her tongue and lips were numb and had no feeling. The strength of Wu Qingyue's kiss also gradually decreased. Then he slightly narrowed his eyes. Then he closed his eyes, and his body suddenly went limp and fell onto Lin Xiao's body. Lin Xiao subconsciously caught him, but when she realized what she had done, she didn't want to push him away. Plop! She threw Wu Qingyue to the ground, and finally turned her head to look out of the window with a sigh of relief. She immediately smelled the scent of blood from afar. At this time, Lu Wan and the others were already covered in blood, and they looked for a place to hide in panic. The number of people had also decreased a lot. Originally, there were more than 10 people in the 2 cars, but now there were only 5 or 6 people squeezed together. They hid in a bank security room. The door of the security room was made of a thick special alloy material. It was sturdy and hard, so it would be very safe to hide here. But the ventilation system in the room was no longer working, so they couldn't stay for too long. Lu Wan's body was now covered in bright red blood, but it wasn't his. He pulled one of his subordinates over to block the blood from his claws. At that time, The level 6 zombie dog rushed over like the wind, and when it was about to pounce on him with its sharp claws, Luwan couldn't dodge in time, and only had time to pull one of his subordinates over to protect him. That huge black fur dog had a pair of pitch-black eyes that flashed with red light. But its body didn't have any wounds like the other zombie beasts. Its whole body was covered with a layer of smooth black fur, very clean. But it couldn't hide the giant dog's zombie-like eyes. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of something hitting came from outside the door. There was also the sound of sharp claws scratching the metal. For the time being, no matter if it was a zombie dog or a zombie, they couldn't come in. Only then did the people in the room let out a sigh of relief. Is anyone hurt? Luwan turned his head and looked at the others present. Everyone shook their heads solemnly. Luwan sized up everyone with a sharp gaze, and only relaxed when he saw that no one was avoiding his gaze. At this time, if he was injured by zombies, then Luwan could only send him a bullet. This was a secret room, and he did not want to wait for someone to suddenly turn into a zombie. Now that they were hiding here, they couldn't go out for the time being. They could only wait until the zombies outside could no longer smell them, and then they would retreat by themselves. Only then could they leave this place again. Bang, bang, bang. The knocking sound from outside the door did not stop. When Luwan turned his head, he did not see the level 5 psychic ability user. His face paled, but he quickly lowered his head to hide it. His drooping eyes were filled with despair at this time, and he tightly covered his other arm with one hand. Black blood oozed out from the gaps between his fingers. The antidote for the virus had not been researched yet, so if he left the base and was infected by the virus, he would only die. Generally, if he was injured and did not turn into a zombie, he would send himself a bullet to prevent himself from turning into a zombie and then being killed by others. But at this time, the psychic ability user did not want to die. He still wanted to live. Everyone's time of infection was different. He wanted to live one day at a time, maybe tomorrow or the day after someone would research the antidote. With this kind of extravagant thought, the psychic ability user decided to hide it for now. But thinking about their current situation, he felt despair again. Let's not talk about whether they could get out of here. Even if they could get out, he may not have the strength to kill zombies and protect himself. At this time, the knocking sounds outside the door suddenly disappeared. Luwan immediately leaned against the door and listened to the movements outside. He found that it was suddenly quiet. Generally, this kind of situation would make people feel dangerous, and Luwan was no exception. After listening for a while, he found that there was really no sound outside. He frowned, and then vigilantly retreated. He looked up, left and right, and carefully observed. Seeing his reaction, the others also paid attention to the surroundings. What's wrong? Luwan did not say anything. He just made a should gesture to the others. After listening quietly for more than 10 minutes, there was still no change. But Luwan did not relax. At this time, somewhere outside the safety room, Alwang was waving its 2 claws and vigorously digging a hole. Something had smashed a hole in this spot earlier, and the cement tiles on the surface had cracked. That was why it was convenient for Alwang to dig there. Alwang's claws were like steel, its 2 front claws rapidly digging nonstop. The mushroom spirit at the side looked at it curiously. The dangling tentacles curled up and down. The umbrella head swayed left and right, looking very novel. Duan Wan and the others stood outside the bank, feeling refreshed and carefree. They should be hiding in the safety room. That's the only place that's safer. But there is no electricity here. The ventilation equipment is off. There's not much air in the safety room. Duan Wan said with both hands in the pockets of her military trousers, looking in the direction of the bank. The few of them just stood there boldly. Although the surrounding zombies were tempted by the smell of the living, they did not dare to approach due to the pressure of Lin Xiao's blood qi. So there were no zombies around them. They overestimate themselves. If it wasn't for the fact that the leader has been so busy recently, he would have given the order to deal with them. Deputy Leader Yuan is still not decisive enough. Shen Yuzhen snorted in disdain, then sighed when she mentioned Yuan Tianxing. This time, they came looking for death. There are still some people to deal with when we go back. Duan Wan smiled. Xiao Liqing turned his head worriedly to look in the direction of his leader. He felt the leader's ability fluctuate, disappearing for a moment and then becoming irritable the next. He did not know what she was doing, and it must be the female zombie leader. Would she take the opportunity to bully his leader? After all, the atmosphere between the two of them was not very good. At this time, Lin Xiao, who was suspected of bullying Wu Qingyue, turned his head to look at Wu Qingyue, who was lying on the ground without a care for his image. He thought about the interaction between the two just now and muttered in his heart, "Wake up and don't know about this. Wake up and don't know about this. Wake up and don't know about this." If he knew that the two of them kissed for almost an hour, and that she took the initiative to go over, he did not know what this person was going to do. Chapter 902. It turned out that psychics who went berserk didn't remember what happened when they went berserk. Lin Xiao stood on the side with her arms crossed, waiting for Wu Chengyue to wake up. After Wu Chengyue fell, he woke up in less than a minute. He opened his eyes and found himself lying on the ground. He immediately saw the dust on the ground. After blinking for a few seconds, Wu Chengyue slowly propped himself up from the ground. He covered his forehead and just stood up. He saw Lin Xiao leaning against the wall with an expressionless face. Where is this? He looked at the unfamiliar surroundings and the dust on the ground. Wu Qingyue hesitantly looked at Lin Xiao and asked. His clothes were wet. Then he looked at the female zombie's clothes. They were also wet. He looked out the window next to the female zombie. It was dark outside. It should be raining. But why were they here? Wu Qingyue walked to the window and looked outside. It was still unfamiliar. He turned around and looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao raised her eyebrows. Don't you remember that you went berserk? It took me a lot of effort to wake you up. Her lips were almost swollen, okay? At this moment, her pale lips were a little purple because the blood in her body was now dark red. After being ravaged by Wu Qingyue, although her lips weren't swollen, the color had darkened. What happened to your lips? Wu Qingyue suddenly looked at her lips strangely and asked. Lin Xiao. She didn't want to talk to him. Wu Qingyue looked at her curiously, looking at her current appearance. Her long hair was originally tied up behind her head. It was dripping wet. Her face was still pale, but there was a layer of luster. Her green eyes flashed with a cold light. The purplish-red lips under her nose made her face even paler. A strand of wet hair hung down from her forehead and stuck to the side of her face. Her pursed purple lips, coupled with her own sharp aura, caused her entire person to exude a cold and elegant temperament. There was an inexplicable temptation in Wu Qingyue's eyes. Lin Xiao calmed herself down and looked at him calmly. It's nothing. Since you're awake, go back. Your energy made Lingling faint. It's a good thing that you instinctively know to protect her. As for Wu Qingyue's question, Lin Xiao could only use Lingling to divert his attention. Sure enough, as soon as he heard about Lingling's situation, Wu Qingyue became nervous. What? Lingling fainted because of me? How is she? Are you hurt? Looking at Wu Qingyue, who was nervously staring at him, Lin Xiao saw a trace of fear and dread in his heart. He was afraid that he would say something that would hurt Lingling. At that time, I only had a cursory look and didn't find any other problems. We'll only know the actual situation after we return, Lin Xiao said. Wu Qingyue's eyes flashed with deep worry, but he suppressed it. He raised his head to look at Lin Xiao. What about you? How did you suppress me? He knew his own strength, let alone when he went berserk. But now that he was awake, there was only him and this female zombie here. She had also said that she had helped him to wake up. Wu Qingyue really wanted to know what had happened during this process. Looking at the surroundings, there were no signs of a fight, which meant that he was not in a berserk state when they were here. Then she must have knocked him down somewhere else and brought him here. Hearing Wu Qingyue's words, Lin Xiao's mouth twitched. She suppressed her facial features that were about to twist. She said expressionlessly, That's not important. What's important is that you are awake now. Don't talk so much nonsense, let's go. I still have something to take care of here. Those people hadn't all died yet, so she was going to clean up the mess. Wu Qingyue looked at her in silence. Her clothes were still wet. Why didn't she change? Even if she didn't change, why couldn't she use her superpower to steam it? It was definitely uncomfortable to wear like this. Sure enough, there was a problem with her body, and it wasn't a small problem. Fortunately, Lin Xiao was still wearing a two-piece suit, a skirt, and a suit jacket. But because her clothes were wet, it was inevitable that they would stick to her body. So her slightly bulging belly was invisible under Wu Qingyue's deliberate gaze. At this time, Wu Qingyue had already dried his clothes. Seeing Lin Xiao turn around, he suddenly reached out to pull her. "What are you doing?" Lin Xiao was pulled back, but she wasn't as repulsed as before. She subconsciously waved her hand away. Maybe it was because her hand had been firmly held by this man not long ago, so she was a little used to it. Without waiting for her to finish, a scorching energy pounced on her body, evaporating all the water in her clothes and hair. Before Lin Xiao could shake off her hand, Wu Qingyue automatically let go. Lin Xiao looked down at her clothes, and her expression suddenly became a little ugly. Without saying anything, she turned and walked straight to the door. There was nothing she could do. She found out. Seeing Lin Xiao walk out without any hesitation, Wu Qingyue suddenly raised his hand and looked at it. He didn't know why, but after holding her hand just now, he had a familiar feeling. When he looked up again, Lin Xiao was already gone. Wu Qingyue immediately rubbed his head, and the bangs in front of his forehead were all pulled to the top of his head, revealing his clean forehead. Because of the temporary change in hairstyle, his temperament also became a little fierce. He stood silently for a few seconds, looked at the door Lin Xiao left, and his eyes deepened. He lifted his legs and walked out. This female zombie's feeling of repulsion towards him became a little subtle. Her attitude didn't seem to be as strong as before, but she still maintained a distance. But there seemed to be something else in the middle of this distance. During the time he lost his mind, she must have done something to him, or he must have done something to her, causing the atmosphere between the two of them to become a little subtle. Wu Qingyue's mouth curved into a meaningful smile. It seemed that he had to find a way to figure out what happened between the two of them. And her body. Thinking of this, Wu Qingyue's mouth relaxed again. He also strode out. Lin Xiao found a staircase and climbed directly to the roof. Then she stood on the roof and looked around. At this time, the rain outside had stopped, but the sky was still gray. A gust of wet wind blew over her body, lifting her long hair and skirt. When Wu Qingyue came up, he saw her directly jump down from the building. Then he appeared on the roof of a slightly lower building, heading towards the aura of Xiao Liqing and Duanwan. His figure flashed, and he also disappeared from the roof. He appeared in front of Duanwan and the others one step ahead of Lin Xiao. Looking at the big snake on the roof of the bank, Wu Qingyue asked them curiously, "What's the situation here?" As soon as Xiao Liqing saw him, he shouted happily, "Leader, you're awake." Chapter 903. Who's inside? Wu Qingyue stood under the roof and looked at the bank across from him. Xiao Liqing said, "Oh, it's the group of people who came last time, the ones who wanted to cause trouble." Wu Qingyue's eyes turned cold and a murderous intent flashed past. "Are you talking about those people who wanted to use their beauty to seduce her?" Of course, it wasn't just the people in the base who knew about it. Even Wu Qingyue knew about it. If he didn't know about it, everyone in the base knew about it and was on guard. As an outsider, if it wasn't convenient for him to interfere, he would have done it already. He was planning to add fuel to the fire when the female zombie made a move on them. Those who dared to covet him were asking for death. How many people are left? How strong are they? Wu Qingyue asked. 6, 1 level 6 earth element, 2 level 5 ones, 1 spirit, and 1 fire element. There are 2 level 3 and 1 level 2. But I don't think we need to do anything. We just need to make sure no one escapes. At this moment, Duanwan spoke up for Xiao Liqing. After saying that, he glanced at the giant snake that was slithering on the roof of the bank opposite him. Wu Qingyue had already seen the giant snake when he arrived here. Now that he heard Duan Wan's words, he understood what she meant. At this moment, Lin Xiao finally walked over slowly. She looked at the formation in front of her and smelled the scent in the air. Then, she stared at the other side and said, "One of them has been infected. I don't know if Lu Wan knows about this." Then, she turned her head and realized that the atmosphere was a bit weird. Duan Wan, Xiao Liqing, and Shen Yuzhen all stared at Lin Xiao's purplish-red lips. Lin Xiao was stunned and then pursed her lips. "What are you looking at?" The three of them suddenly turned their heads and looked at Wu Qingyue's lips. Lin Xiao. She felt like she was going to be betrayed by her teammates. What should she do? Could she throw them out? But it was too late. Sure enough, when Wu Qingyue saw their reactions, he finally realized what was going on. He turned his head and looked at Lin Xiao's lips carefully, then slowly smiled. The smile in his eyes was so bright that Lin Xiao couldn't bear to look at it. The other three were also stunned by his smile. All of them turned their heads away in unison. No wonder this female zombie had such a strange feeling towards him when he woke up. Was it because he had kissed her? Right. He remembered that he had received information that the potion that this female zombie gave Lingling to suppress her awakening could solve the berserk state of psychics. Because he had just woken up, his IQ wasn't high enough, so he didn't think of this problem. Noticing that Wu Qingyue's gaze had become fiery, Lin Xiao silently raised his eyes to the sky. She saw nothing. She knew nothing. Ahem, where's Awang? Xiao Lin couldn't help but ask after looking at the sky for 3 seconds. Duan Wan immediately retracted her gaze and looked at her as she replied, "He's inside. I don't know what he's doing, but those guys are hiding in the vault." Lin Xiao narrowed his eyes as he explained the strength of the people inside. He was not in a hurry. He just waited with Duan Wan and the others expressionlessly. It would be even better if a certain someone withdrew that dazzling gaze. Duan Wan and the other two turned their backs to Wu Qingyue. They really couldn't look directly at his rippling aura at this time. Shen Yuzhen was fine. At least she had a husband, so her defense was relatively strong. But the other two single dogs were somewhat abused. After more than half an hour, they suddenly saw people rushing out of the bank with gunshots. Several energy auras also came out in a chaotic manner. It was obvious that a fight had begun. A wood dash, Wang's barking came from inside. After they rushed out before they had time to look around, a huge snake head suddenly fell from the sky and bit one of the two level 5 psychics. A dash. The level 5 fire psychic didn't have time to react. He let out a scream as he was sucked into the sky. Dahe didn't eat him. It just used its 2 poisonous teeth to penetrate deep into his body and swung him around on the roof. Red blood rained down from the sky, dripping everywhere like a rain of blood. Plop! Soon, that person was spat out by Dahe. He was thrown down like a piece of dead meat. The body on the ground was poisoned to a purplish-black color and bleeding from all 7 orifices. Moreover, the stomach that was bitten by the 2 poisonous teeth had been torn open by the force of the throw, and the intestines and internal organs had been thrown out. Wang rushed out of the vault. Bullets and level 2 and 3 psychic abilities hit him, but he didn't care at all. He directly pounced on them without dodging. With one claw, he pressed down one of them and opened his mouth to bite off the entire head. Wang. Accidentally, he directly bit off the head and swallowed it. Wang, you're eating random things again. Lin Xiao suddenly shouted at Wang. As soon as she shouted, Lu Wan and the others immediately noticed their figures. "It's you." Lu Wan stared fiercely at where Lin Xiao and the others were. He was not stupid. He heard the female leader's sudden shout. Looking at the bloody mouth of the giant dog behind them, he knew that she had sent it to deal with them. Lin Xiao's figure flashed, and she appeared on a lamppost a dozen meters away from Lu Wan and the others. She looked down at Lu Wan and the others who were still alive and sneered. "Didn't you follow us here? Why? Surprised?" Her meaning was clear. She had directly pointed out the other party's goal and intention. Lu Wan's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly realized something. He glared at her and gritted his teeth. "You know everything?" From this woman's words, he immediately knew that she already knew their plan. He didn't expect that the plan they had thought was so well planned would be seen clearly by others. This made Luwan suddenly feel that he and Zuo-chan were like a few clowns, being watched by others as if they were watching a show. The others did not take them seriously at all. The humiliation of being looked down upon rose in his heart, and it made Luwan's heart burn with anger. At this time, Luwan only had the psychic covered in cold sweat, and the other level 3 psychic. The giant dog had already pounced on one of them in the vault, and it had pounced on him again after coming out. The other one had been snatched away by the mutant snake on the roof. Lin Xiao smiled faintly and looked at him with narrowed eyes. Yes, I know what you guys want to do. Do you know why Lu Jun and Lin Wenwen's progress is so slow? Of course it's because we all know what you guys want to do. So what information do you think you can get? But that Zuo-chan is out of my expectations. I haven't even done anything yet, and he has already thrown himself into the poisonous insect's nest. I can go visit him when I get back. Maybe I can make him unable to cure the poison forever? Chapter 904. Yu. Luwan was so angry that he was about to vomit blood, but he didn't know what to say. Anyway, it was useless to say anything now. They had been exposed, and they didn't even have a chance to escape. We didn't do anything to harm the base, did we? Don't you think it's too cruel for you, the leader, to treat us so ruthlessly? The spiritual type ability user suddenly spoke up at this time, his expression already ugly. His face was pale and sweaty, and his lips were blue. Even the area around his eyes began to darken. But at this time, Luwan and the other person were no longer paying attention to him. Hearing this, Luwan's eyes suddenly lit up, and he shouted at Lin Xiao. Yes, that's right. Even if we had some bad intentions towards you in the beginning, we haven't done anything bad to your base now. What right do you have to kill us? Lin Xiao sneered and said, Is it not a crime to have criminal consciousness and attempt to commit a crime? Do I have to wait for you to take my base into your hands before I have the right to resist you? Besides, do you think this is still the peaceful society before Doomsday? We don't care about the law, morality, or anything else. We only care about the law of the jungle. Then she suddenly waved her hand. Wolf, go. Bite him. Yes, that's the one. Dai, bite that. Yes, that one. The last one, mushroom spirit, don't eat it. Eat this one alive. Duan Wan and the others watched as Lin Xiao commanded the 3 animals and plants to rush towards the 3 people. Even the mushroom spirit, who was picking up the bodies and absorbing the blood, was called over. However, the mushroom spirit was eating happily and ignored Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao, this mushroom spirit is so disobedient. Should I use it to make a chicken stew when I get back? Don't kill me. The level 3 paranormal turned around and ran, not forgetting to shout. Startled by Lin Xiao's murderous intent, the mushroom spirit immediately dropped the body it was eating, swung its tentacles and legs, and chased after the escaping level 3 paranormal. In the eyes of the mushroom spirit, this person was running in slow motion. In the next second, the mushroom spirit had already jumped up and directly trampled on the level 3 metahuman who was still running. The roots covered the dumbfounded rank 3 metahuman and pierced straight into the cement floor. Several tentacles on the umbrella quickly pierced into the body of the rank 3 metahuman through the gaps of the roots. A blood-curdling screech immediately resounded. Blood and flesh gushed out from the mushroom spirit's tentacles. After a while, the mushroom spirit pulled out its roots and walked away with a few strong legs. All that was left was a dried corpse that had its flesh and blood sucked dry. On the other side, Luwan was a level 6 ability user. His Earth Wall, Earth Spike, and Earth Fissure abilities prevented Al Wong from dealing any substantial damage to him. Spirit-type espers were physically weak to begin with, and their attacks were all mental attacks. But at this time, his whole body was as cold as ice. His mind was already in a mess, and the effect of his special ability attack had been greatly reduced. Moreover, his ability was only at level 5, and his mental attack would not have any effect on a level 6 mutated beast. Therefore, he didn't plan to attack from the start. Instead, he planned to flee. If Big Black could let him escape, it wouldn't be a level 6 mutated beast. The spiritual type ability user had only taken a few steps when a black shadow suddenly flashed in front of him. A huge snake head rushed in front of him and turned around to face him. It had a pair of cold and emotionless diamond-shaped eyes, and a slender forked tongue flashed in the flat snake mouth. The spiritual type ability user felt the threat of death looming in front of him. His eyes widened. He didn't know if he had a mental breakdown or if the virus in his body was acting up, but his legs gave way and he knelt on the ground. He stared blankly at the huge black snake that was less than 2 meters away from him. All the strength in his body disappeared. Big Black wasn't in the mood to play with him. It stared at him for 2 seconds before it suddenly opened its mouth and revealed a pair of sharp teeth. Then it bit down with a cold glint. Lin Xiao and the others looked coldly at Lu Wan, who was the last one standing. After defending against Ao Wang's attacks for a few minutes, Ao Wang smashed a wall with his claws and went through it. Then he pounced on Lu Wan. Lu Wan was pounced on. When he looked up, he saw a big mouth with 2 rows of fangs coming toward his face. After that, he didn't know what happened. After being scolded by Lin Xiao, Ao Wang didn't bite off half of Lu Wan's head. Instead, he threw his head to the side and spat out a few mouthfuls of bloody saliva. Of course, the blood didn't belong to him. All right, we can go back now. Lin Xiao clapped her hands and leaped down from the street lamp with a look of finishing up. With a wave of his hand, he tossed out an off-road vehicle and got into the back seat. She thought that Duan Wan and Shun Yuzhen would get into the driver's seat and the passenger's seat as usual. However, as soon as she got into the car, the door next to her opened. Naturally, Wu Qinghua came in. Lin Xiao was stunned. He turned his head and saw that Xiao Liqing was grabbing the arm of his personal guard, Duan Wan, and dragging her away. Although Duan Wan had been looking back, she didn't stop walking. Shen Yuzhen climbed into the driver's seat and started the car, pretending that she didn't know anything. Lin Xiao was speechless. After enduring for a while, she couldn't take it anymore. She turned her head and glared at Wu Qingyue, who was sitting next to her. "Leader Wu, your car is over there." She gritted her teeth and pointed at Duan Wan, who was being dragged into another car by Xiao Liqing. Wu Qingyue looked at her with a smile and said, "I know, but I think little Cheng likes Duan Wan. Why don't we let them be together? Let's give them some space." Lin Xiao was speechless. Which eye of yours saw that kind of atmosphere between the two of them? You were the one who had bad intentions. Okay? You even pushed the blame to him. Xiao Liqing, who was the scapegoat, didn't know that he had become the man who liked Duan Wan. He had obviously dragged Duan Wan over to create an opportunity for his leader. Who knew if he would directly push Duan Wan back after hearing Wu Qingyue's words? Shen Yuzhen sympathetically looked at the car behind them through the rear-view mirror. Based on her previous understanding of Leader Wu, he had already lied. This wasn't the first time, and it definitely wouldn't be the last. It seemed like little Xiao was ready to be sold by his leader. Although she knew that she couldn't laugh, Shun Yuzhen couldn't help but squint her eyes. The corners of her mouth twitched, but she didn't let herself laugh out loud. "Ha ha! What an unlucky child." Xiao Liqing, who was sitting in the back seat, felt an inexplicable chill. He looked left and right in confusion. The sky was still gloomy and the air was too humid. The weather was indeed a bit cold. Chapter 905. Lin Xiao retracted her gaze and looked at him coldly. "Do you think I'm blind? Why can't I see that Xiao Liqing is interested in Duan Wan?" Wu Qingyue smiled and said, "If I say there is, then there is." Lin Xiao looked at him. After this person sobered up, his expression changed back to that of a smiling fox. His smile was very fake, and his originally beautiful eyes were curved into the shape of a moon. It covered up the emotions in his eyes, and also the originally beautiful eyes. She suddenly missed those cold and emotionless eyes. Seeing this female zombie suddenly staring at his eyes, Wu Qingyue's eyes lit up. This guy doesn't seem to know the change in his aura. Didn't she realize that her attitude towards him was a bit different? Tell me, what did you do to me before? With your current situation, you can't directly knock me out. Besides, I don't feel uncomfortable anywhere. There seemed to be a sweet taste in his mouth. This should be the taste in her mouth. Wu Changyue moved his neck and raised his hand to touch his head. He couldn't help but glance at Lin Xiao's lips again. His expression was like a cat that had stolen a fish. The smell of her body was still very pleasant. He didn't feel anything on his neck and head. It didn't seem like he was knocked out. In that case, he must have drunk the medicine in her base. Lin Xiao looked at him and said expressionlessly, I didn't knock you out. I just made you drink the medicine." Saying that, she turned her head away unnaturally and didn't look at him. The numb feeling in her mouth from his tongue seemed to still remain on her lips. She didn't expect that this man, who usually looked gentle and smiling, would kiss her as if he wanted to swallow her whole. After removing his pretense, he was like a wild beast, tyrannical, but thinking that he was already crazy, but he could still maintain a sense of protection for Ling Ling and herself. This made Lin Xiao slightly untie something in her heart, and she didn't reject him as much as before. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao's heart suddenly shook, and she finally realized that the change in her feelings towards Wu Chengyue was a bit out of her control. This made her feel a bit lost, and for a moment, she was at a loss. However, she quickly suppressed the confusion and helplessness in her heart and adjusted her expression without changing her expression. Wu Qingyue looked at her with a meaningful smile. When adepts go berserk, they won't cooperate obediently. We all know that. Although I don't remember this part of my memory, I don't think I would be so obedient to drink the potion, right? He had already guessed what had happened between the two of them, but he didn't know the details. Looking at the unscathed female zombie, she was able to get close to him when he was in a frenzy. If his energy wasn't avoiding her, then his instincts didn't mean to hurt her. Since she was willing to force him to drink the potion, did it mean that she had already accepted him a little? But at this time, the female zombie shrunk herself into her shell and avoided him, which made Wu Chengyue a little nervous. In the past, no matter how he flirted with her, she would always respond coldly and never run away. But now, she began to run away. Did that mean that she had begun to care about him? The more he thought about it, the more Wu Chengyue wanted to know her answer. Looking at the side of the female zombie's face, his eyes unconsciously fell on her light purple lips. After so long, the color only faded a little. Was it because the blood in a zombie's body didn't flow? He remembered the last time when they were in the water, he kissed her lips. Although the color looked very light, but the taste was very delicious. Soft, bouncy, and a little cool. This time, he kissed her lips into a purplish red color. Obviously, he used a lot of force at that time. Unfortunately, he didn't have any memory of it. What a loss. Lin Xiao felt uncomfortable being stared at by him. She also suddenly found that her feelings for him had changed subtly. It made her heart a little messy. Now that she was being stared at by him, she couldn't bear it anymore. She didn't know why, but she felt like she was a little hot. Was it an illusion? Although you went berserk, you still retained a trace of rational instincts. You knew to recognize me in Ling Ling, so you didn't reject us. I gave you a cup of water, and you drank it directly. Nothing else happened. She looked straight ahead and said with no expression. She didn't dare to look at his eyes. Wu Chengyue was surprised and said with some disbelief, "It could be like this? Then why didn't I feel anything at all? Is that right, Xiaozhen?" Then he suddenly turned his head and asked Shun Yuzhen, who was driving in the front. Shun Yuzhen was listening to the conversation between the two when she suddenly heard Wu Chengyue ask her. She replied, "Leader Wu, your situation seems to be a little special. You can still control your energy. It's not like the others. Their energy is so violent that they can't be controlled." Wu Qingyue nodded. Even Shun Yuzhen said so. It seemed that his situation was indeed better than the others. But of course, he wouldn't believe what this female zombie said when she gave him a cup of water. He would drink it. If that was the case, then what was with the color of her mouth? Could it be that she still wanted to ask for benefits for herself when she went berserk? If that was the case, then her reaction shouldn't be like this, right? He thought that he might have kissed her forcefully, but she didn't show any disgust or hatred. Wu Qinghua looked at Lin Xiao's eyes a lot deeper. But looking at the female zombie's current appearance of running away, Wu Qinghua appropriately restrained his aura. He couldn't force her too much. What if her emotions were a little unstable and she ran away after being stimulated? It seemed that he had to slowly lure her out of that shell, or catch her before she completely retreated. Thinking about it, Wu Qinghua changed the topic. Right, why do we come so far? I remember that the range of movement of psychics when they go berserk doesn't seem to be large. Even if you want to lure me out of your base, you don't have to lure me this far, right? This was Lin Xiao's problem. Her eyes flashed and said, if I don't lure you further away, I'm afraid that you will run back to our base. Shen Yuzhen was a little confused about this problem, because at that time, she felt that their leader's aura suddenly disappeared for a while, and then Wu Qinghua's energy skyrocketed like crazy. After a while, he quickly rushed in the direction of the downtown area. Shi, Duan Wanxiao, Li Cheng, and the others didn't know what was going on. They thought it was their leader's ability. Now hearing Lin Xiao say this, Shen Yuzhen was even more certain. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.